you starting now?
Yeah, I'm introducing you starting now.
Then we have to go like just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, just 2 minutes before we start, we'll just go live. Yeah, been asked to wait till we go live. Yeah, start. Can't use this. So hi, welcome everyone to this Smart Protein Forum event, which is being organized jointly by TDU, our university, by GFI, and we have GFI colleagues here, by FIXI, and we have FIXI colleagues here, and by Brabender, and I saw Devomitra, yeah, from Brabender here. So thanks a lot to all the organizing partners, and would also like at the outset to thank the funders of the program, RIST Rural India Supporting Trust, who have seeded this program, and it's quite a capital-intensive program, that they have seeded in this place, and they seeded it 5 years ago, right, when there was very little talk in this country about smart proteins. The GFI had just started here, and we were starting here. And to take that visionary call 5 years ago is really talking about foresight, thinking about what are the country needs and where should we start investing, right? So really thankful to them as well. We'll have a short message from them as we go through the welcome period. I just wanted to, Padma will be doing a lot of the, talking about the forum as such, but I just wanted to narrate a little story that I came across last week in one of the inauguration functions in this very room, and that has to do with the lamp that we have. No, we usually begin with lighting of the lamp, and at the head of the lamp you see a bird, right? And that bird is
Recording in progress.
is a hamsa, right? A hans. And the reason it is there is because it is the mythological symbol of wisdom. And the reason it is considered very wise is, one of the reasons it's considered wise is that it can separate milk from water. And how does it do that? If you start looking at some of the literature, that it's one of the few birds that secretes a saliva, right? Most birds don't secrete a saliva, right? It secretes. And its saliva is able to coagulate milk. And that protein which gets coagulated is what it's eating, right? So its wisdom comes from its ability to be able to get protein from milk and eat it preferentially. And I think everybody who's here physically and online, and we have more than 800 people who have now registered for this event. We didn't expect that kind of registration. We were thinking of a couple of hundred maybe at max, so 800 we were quite blown. But I'm guessing that's something to do with the smartness of the audience, the Indians that are interested in proteins, right? So hopefully we are building on that wisdom, or taking inspiration from that wisdom in this one day event that we have, and taking back home and making this a big theme, right, for the country as such. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Padma, who will introduce the forum. Then we have Dr. Neelu Srivastav online with us. She's going to be talking about, so she's from DBT, and very, very thankful to Neeluji and to Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, who was very kind. He could not personally come for this event, or is quite tied up right now, especially because of the monsoon session of the parliament. And but Neeluji is the protein expert from DBT, and Prachi Agarwal, who will join later, who's the protein expert from BIRAC, right? And we are really honored to have their presence here. And so Neelu will say a few words after Padma, and then we have our Vice Chancellor Darshanji, who will share his thoughts, right? And then we begin with the panels. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Respected dignitaries gracing this occasion both in person and virtually, panelists of today's sessions, invitees, and participants. On behalf of the Good Food Institute India, I extend a hearty welcome to all of you. And it is my privilege to introduce the Smart Protein Forum to this August gathering. The Smart Protein Forum is a collaborative platform comprising members of the Indian smart protein ecosystem across science, industry, and policy to synthesize key opportunities and challenges, facilitate knowledge sharing, and forge meaningful partnerships. This forum, often categorized as the Smart Protein Industry Forum and the Smart Protein Science Forum, is a multi-stakeholder consortium that propagates collective advocacy from industry and academia to drive innovations and accelerate progress for smart proteins. The forum was first introduced through the roundtable discussions at the Smart Protein Summit held during 2021 and 2022 and has been running in soft launch mode ever since. In 2023, we aim to formalize this forum and execute outcome-based working groups that meet with a cadence. The process was officially kicked off in June at our very first Smart Protein Science Forum that we convened at IIT Delhi, wherein the members formalized India's first plant-based smart protein expert committee. So moving forward, the Smart Protein Forum hopes to establish a prestigious ecosystem identity and scientific legitimacy to lend collective intelligence, advocacy, and opportunities for collaboration with the aim of pushing forward the smart protein vision for India. So we hope that you all will join us in this mission to build a secure, sustainable, and just future of food. So I thank you all for this opportunity, and I'm sure you all will have plenty of food for thoughts from today's sessions, which have been meticulously planned for all of you. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Smart Protein Forum. My name is Andrew Hayduk, and I'm a program manager at Rural India Supporting Trust. We are a U.S.-based private family foundation that support charitable organizations in India working in the sectors of health, education, disability, and environment. I'd like to thank Dr. Gurmeet Singh at TDU for inviting me to say a few words to open this forum. TDU is one of RISC's longest and most trusted partners. We currently support the pioneering work that they are doing in their Food Futures program, a key component of which is developing highly nutritious food products and ingredients. For RISC, the Food Futures program falls under our health sector support. This is because we view health through a holistic lens and support holistic health solutions. We firmly believe that the products, practices, and technologies that TDU are developing have the potential to address critical health concerns such as iron deficiency, protein deficiency, and various chronic diseases. We also believe that they can do so in a highly impactful, affordable, and scalable manner. As such, for us, they represent a holistic health solution. At RISC, we are continually excited by the work that TDU are doing, and we'll be very interested to see what ideas and synergies emerge from this forum. Thank you again, Gurmeet, and I hope that you all thoroughly enjoy the event.
So thanks, Andrew. And now we'll have Dr. Neelu Srivastav to inaugurate the whole event and give us the perspective from DBT. Yeah, Neeluji, all yours. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gurmeet. Good morning to all. It is indeed a pleasure and honor to be part of this Smart Protein Forum. And I really thank Dr. Gurmeet and TDU for providing this opportunity to interact with you all. I'm sure with effort of each one of you contributing in your best way through this Smart Protein Forum will help India to position itself as a global leader. So we all know that smart protein in the past few years have morphed from niche product into a mainstream commodity. So we are also aware that there are some hundreds of startups in India working in this direction, innovating in their own way to come up with novel products for the consumers. Singapore and Israel, we are told that they are already started tasting the lab-grown meats. And recently in the last month, US FDA has granted first ever approval to the lab-grown meat to 2 companies. So West already is embracing it in full-fledged manner and looking for more. So what we are seeing today is just the beginning of a larger protein transformation which is just waiting to happen. So the first slide, please. Next one. This slide, I just wanted to emphasize the complex interaction between the climate change and the food system. Food system is very dynamic and ever changing in response to the natural forces such as environmental change, climatic change, demographies, economies, technological advancement, consumer preferences, and so on. So as we can see here, the green revolution that happened around 1960s that pushed the high yielding variety crops, mechanized the farm tools, provided better irrigation facilities, use of pesticide and fertilizers. This all resulted in a significant increase in productivity. And but it also led to overemphasis on few of the crops like wheat, maize, rice. And this in turn led to nutritional transition of the people. And this led people to eat more of high glycemic index foods, and therefore exponential increase in what we are seeing today is lifestyle diseases. So in addition to this, the changing climatic condition, the increase in global temperature, the unpredicted rainfall together are putting immense pressure on our current food system. As we can see in this slide that in 2020, by 2020 itself, the pressure is so much. We are at the right time that we urgently need a transformative change, not only to secure the food need, but also the planetary health. So the next slide, please. So by 2050, there will be 2 billion more people on earth than we are today. And ending hunger and all forms of malnutrition are part of the second sustainable development goal. To meet this and to feed the growing population is one of the biggest challenges that the world is facing. Current food systems are failing to deliver healthy diets for all, and they are also the major driver for negative environmental impact. Half of our world's habitable area is used for agriculture, and out of this we know that 70%, 75% of the agricultural land is used for raising and feeding livestock. Yet it only provides 1/3 of the protein supply. So we all will agree that a major innovation is needed to change the way we eat. Next, please. With respect to India, I wanted to emphasize here that we are very happy today. This demographic profile is young India. We are full of workforce. We are the largest workforce here. But as we move from 2020 to 2050, this demographic profile is going to change with increase in life expectancy. So we are going to have a good number of aging population, and who will not want to age healthy and age actively. So research indicates that protein requirement increases with age. 25 to 50% more of total protein is needed for an older adult. 30 to 50% muscle mass is lost as we age, and eating more protein can help in active aging by keeping more muscle mass. So considering India's changing demographic profile by 2050, the new science and novel nutritious food, maybe smart and alternative proteins, are an urgent need to ensure the good health and well-being, and thereby meeting the SDG 3 of as defined by the United Nations. Next, please. So considering these urgent need at Department of Biotechnology, we have taken a very important initiative, that's a national initiative on fostering high performance biomanufacturing. So under this initiative, we propose to use microbes. By saying biomanufacturing, we mean to use microbes, cells, and enzymes to produce commercially relevant products. The green chemistry and biocatalyst are the focus across the diverse sector: food therapeutics, material, biofabrics, bioplastic, chemicals, biofuels, and so on. So we have identified 6 verticals under this initiative. Through over the last few years, it is almost 35 years, the DBT has been nurturing innovation, research, and manufacturing under biotechnology. And in the next 25 years, that is Amrit Kal vision, we target, we have an ambitious vision, and we want to target to achieve US dollar $32.8 billion GDP. And this will be only possible by taking such bold initiative, and the strategic focus is well aligned with the national initiative of Government of India, that is the Union Budget 23-24 announcement for green growth, PM's vision, Honorable PM's vision for India's net zero carbon economy, lifestyle for the environment launched by the Honorable Prime Minister in October 2022, and a vision to make India Atmanirbhar and Make in India mission to be successful. Next, please. So these are some of the examples I wanted to just share what new biological capabilities can bring about. Fermentation, as we have known for centuries, have been used to make bread and brew beer, but now we can use it to create fabrics such as artificial spider silk. Mushroom roots that can now be used for making leather rather than the animal hide. Plastic, of course, which we urgently need a substitute, can be made with yeast instead of petrochemicals. So these are some of the biological capabilities that I wanted to highlight what this biological transformation or biomanufacturing initiative can bring about. Next, please. So coming back to biomanufacturing initiative, smart and alternative protein is one of the sector identified 6 sector. One of the sector is a smart alternative proteins. So smart proteins, or globally the alternative protein, as we know, holds a huge potential in diversifying our protein supply and build a more secure and healthier food system. They can be produced from plants, microbes or animal cells, and they are much efficient in terms of resource utilization. So under these we have 3 categories: plant-based proteins, fermentation derived with a special focus on single cell protein, and a lab grown or cultured meat. So as we work together to drive this sector, we have to ensure that it remains sustainable, affordable and accessible to all, environmentally responsible, and last but not the least, it should be safe and nutritional. And it should lead to positive impact on bioeconomy, environment, biodiversity, food and nutritional security, and the most important is consumer trust. Next, please. So this sector holds immense opportunities. Under plant-based proteins, in our country, we have the potential to utilize indigenous and underutilized crops such as millets, legumes, etc., and which can help to diversify the protein basket. We also have the opportunity to create and modify the plant protein given the scientific capabilities available in our country. Under lab-grown meats, it is a disruptive innovation but can possibly resolve the sustainability and health issues related to the livestock sector. Microbial proteins have immense potential to deliver high-quality food and feed products. They can be engineered to produce macro and micronutrient compounds. Microbial fermentation from non-food feedstocks. This can offer great opportunity to alleviate economic, ecological, and societal problems. Fermented foods, as we all know, have lots of health benefit: prebiotic, probiotic, symbiotics. They are already there, and lots have to be done to increase the nutrient bioavailability while reducing the anti-nutritional factors. We can also use microbes as protein source. As I said, single cell proteins are very important. Next. So keeping this in mind, already at DBT we have created a sectorial expert committee to have careful deliberation and discussion on existing strength in the countries, the gaps and challenges, regulatory requirement, and what need to be done from the government and to take it further. Next, please. So with this, I would like to conclude my slide presentations. And we all have known that we have been given 2 choices: live to eat or eat to live. But right now, we all should actually come together and eat for the environment and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neelu. That was, I think, a wonderful intro covering what the global scenario is, the countries that are leading have put things in place in this sector, and then moving to the demographics and the changing demographics and how the protein needs of the country will change. and then talking about what the government's view is and the expert committees that they have created to look into this sector and grow the sector. So thanks a lot for that wonderful overview. Now we have like to invite our Vice Chancellor, Darshan Shankarji, to give the TDU perspective on proteins here.
That was a very good morning, everybody. That was a very inspiring introductory talk by Neelu Srivastav, challenging us to look at global leadership, and that was a new one for me, eat for the environment. So I would like to first thank the people who have helped us who have sponsored us in some sense or helped us in partnership to organize this particular conference, starting with RIST, whom you all heard, the Good Food Institute, doing remarkable work, the Skill Sector Council. Of course, we are very pleased that both DBT and with Rajesh Gokhale currently holding two hats, I would say DBT, DST and BIRAC are also giving moral support for this particular initiative. And of course, I would like to recognize and appreciate the partnership with Bra Bender company, who have helped us with that technology relating to proteins. Of course, I don't need to say what I'm just going to say, but I will say it to this audience that from a biological perspective, I mean, the human body is a big zero without proteins. You could say that. I mean, proteins is so central in terms of all biological processes, forms a major building block, and all biological processes, the signaling part, the enzymes, etc., now they're all about proteins. So anyway, so we all know the central role of proteins. I would have, along with a growing population over the decades, a vested interest, because as Neelu said, as you get older, the requirement of proteins for the body increases. Now there are so many dimensions to protein. Some of them have been spelt out by Neelu, but this is a whole day workshop with people with great expertise in sources of protein, on types of protein, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure it's going to be a very productive day. But from the transdisciplinary university's perspective, to be a global leader, India has one special advantage which not all of you may recognize, and that is the advantage of this framework that we have in India, which not very many industries or not very many science institutions have adopted a framework, and that is a framework that in 2005 was in fact in some sense formally seeded by Dr. M.S. Valyathan when he was supported by the principal scientific advisor at that time to run a 10-year program on what he called, the term he used was Ayurvedic biology, that framework. So in addition to all the directions that have been spelt out by Neelu Srivastav, about sources of proteins and so on and so forth, and the huge technological challenges that are related to these multiple sources, moving away from animal sources and essentially shifting now to plant-based sources. That's the biggest challenge for the whole world, and certainly, but the advantage we have because of this framework, and in TDU, you all are all present here, is that while we may extract proteins from wherever, source, using the kinds of technologies and innovation that will be involved in that extraction process, Ayurveda is a source of knowledge which can help in terms of making that protein bioassimilable or bioavailable. I mean, that is the strength of the Ayurveda knowledge system. So this is one thing that TDU will bring to the table, apart from, all the other sort of knowledge and technologies that is involved, which is Ayurveda leads that can help to make that. We underestimate this, the potential of this knowledge. It's a tremendous bit of knowledge here for improving metabolism, for improving bioavailability, for improving bioassimilation. And similarly, you can get Ayurveda leads if we want to look at, for example, lentils and grains as sources, which is going to be one of the sources amongst many. To classify, I mean, we have a whole understanding of, different ways in which we look at lentils, for example. So the protein in the urad dal is quite different and distinct from perhaps the protein that may be there in the moong dal. And as common people, we all know that, you can eat moong dal every day all your life. In all seasons, etc., etc. But you can't eat urad dal every day. No, I mean, in India, in our food habits, we only eat urad dal in a particular season, and even then when we cook it in a particular way, because it is not so, it's difficult to digest. There is certainly protein there, and a rich source of protein. And in South India, of course, you know that we have found a way in which you can, in fact, use urad dal every day in the form of an idli. Now that is a technological process where you have transformed the use of that. So I'm saying, and idli, by the way, is an Ayurvedic product. I mean, even though the entire idea of fermentation and, the whole process that is involved, I mean, steaming and all that, perhaps came from Cambodia. There were lots of interactions that India has had with different countries, and that method of processing food was not an Indian method. The fermenting, the then steaming, and so on and so forth. The whole idli process. That method was perhaps something that the Chola times, our kings were married to women from that part of the world, and so there was a whole lot of transmission of knowledge that took place. But then the use of that knowledge to make a thing like idli was, of course, an Indian innovation, to use that method to make idli. So I'm saying that we can get leads from Ayurveda in terms of bioavailability, bioassimilation, how to enhance that in terms of protein. We may also be able to identify and experiment with new sources of plant proteins derived from a very extensive food database that Ayurveda has generated over the centuries. I mean, you may be aware that the NIN database has got something of the order of a little less than 600 ingredients. But if you put together a database on foods and food ingredients from Ayurvedic sources, you're looking at 3 times larger database, which we are curating and we are building up here. So you might be able to look at sources. Another very interesting thing that Ayurveda might be able to contribute to this smart protein program is that, when you cook those proteins, today the cooking oils, we have this problem that, all our cooking oils we stabilize using chemicals as antioxidants and so on and so forth. In order to increase their shelf life, because in their natural state they won't last, that long, even in terms of shelf stability. But then many of us don't realize that, when you are actually cooking with that oil, which you have stabilized, it may be cold pressed or whatever, but then you have added those antioxidants. But when you're actually cooking, what is happening is that perhaps those antioxidants are turning into pro-oxidants at the temperatures at which we cook. So we do have a problem there that, we need to be searching for natural antioxidants, which Ayurveda does have, in order to stabilize the cooking oils which we'll be using for, making use of these proteins. So I'm just pointing out some directions, and these are directions that many people may not have thought of because of their unfamiliarity with this knowledge system. But I think with acknowledgement to Dr. M.S. Valyathan, who created this framework, with appreciation for DST, which supported this framework for over a decade in the Ayurveda biology program that the sub-DST and at that time, the Office of the Advisor to the PM supported. We do have this framework. Now, this framework is not available today, is not being used today in many basic science laboratories. It's not being used today by industry. We, in fact, run a master's program, if I might just mention on the side. We run a master's program, MSc, Life Sciences, on Ayurveda biology. So, many of you people from industry, if you all want to depute and second people to get familiar with this framework, it's a very promising framework because it will combine the systemic perspectives of looking at biological change. We look at biological change today in modern biology at the molecular level. That's very important. But here in Ayurveda, we look at biological change, the same business of biological change, but we look at it at a systemic level. And both have limitations. The molecular perspective on biological change, its limitation is you can't extrapolate what you see at the molecular level to higher levels of organization of the biological of elements in the biological system, to tissues, to organs, and certainly not to the whole body. There is the other extreme, that we understand what is happening in the whole biological system, we have no clue as to what is happening at the molecular level. And so this framework helps a great deal, and it will also help in this smart protein program. So with those few words which might be on some unfamiliar terrain to many of you, I congratulate my colleagues and particularly Professor Gurmeet Singh for having taken this initiative along with the partners whom I have acknowledged earlier. And I'm sure this will be a very interesting workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Darshanji. I think those are additional dimensions, and this kind of presents the holistic thinking around proteins, that there is so much of, if you really want to make this sector a big success in India and lead globally, there are so many dimensions of knowledge that we can pull in to truly lead globally. So thanks a lot for those perspectives and dimensions. And now we come to the event for the day. There are, firstly, thanks a lot to all the industry partners who are going to be panelists for sparing the day. I see most of them are here already, so taking the full day off, I know how much of a challenge that is. And thank you for taking the time off and making this event, contributing to the success of this event, hopefully. And then we have, from the culinary world, we have the chefs. I can see Chef Arpavan and there are others who will join. I think this is an attempt to get all the stakeholders onto a platform so that we get multiple viewpoints to this sector, right from the sourcing and the processing of proteins to what are the government policies and how are they encouraging the sector, how are we looking at building the human capacity and training and skilling in this sector, how is the industry, both the producing industry and the transforming industry will transform these into products which are delightful to taste, because nothing happens unless these things taste right, unless they are shelf stable, unless it's priced right. So a really valuable part which is played by them. And then of course the chefs who always lead what we eat, right? Whatever the chefs are cooking today in their kitchens is what we'll be eating in the next few years. So they are setting the trends for us. And today the chefs are leading the sustainability space as well, and looking at how do you make it's not just culinary arts, no, but it is health, it is nutrition, and it is environment as well, right? And we have Ayurvedic doctors on the panel to present their view. We have nutritionists and health scientists on the panel to bring their view. And the last panel is another interesting one where we are trying to look at how do we make this whole sector inclusive, right? So that the growers, at one end and the mass consumers at the other end, so that can smart proteins also look at midday meals, right? How does every Indian participate in this sector? And so we have a last session around that space. So there are 4 interesting panel sessions through the day, and hopefully a lot of you will stick around for them to get this holistic perspective as we are looking at. Besides the panels in this room, there are also experience tours. We call them science and experience tours, which are running outside, which will expose, take you through the labs, the kitchen, the pilot plant, get a lot of tastings done, and so that you can touch, feel, see, experience the science as well as the products. And we have a few industry partners with us today as well. We have company Nets who are here, who are showcasing their protein classifying technology, protein shifting technology, how to make protein concentrates without the standard wet processing, right? So just by grinding it down. We have Buller and Brabender who are talking about extrusion technology right from a pilot scale to a full scale. We have Griffith Foods who are talking about various ingredients and doing a tasting of the products, things which go into formulating products from smart proteins. And we have Happiest Health and Food Safety Works, I see Prashant here, right, who are also here and have some stalls outside to communicate knowledge around this area. Right? So thanks a lot for everybody, and of course our audience. Nice to see that it's a full room here. We were worried whether we had 800 registrations, how many footfalls will we actually have finally, and nice to see that we have a good number of footfalls here, and I see the tours are also going well. So with that we start the first panel, developing next generation plant-based products and building the smart protein talent pool. This is basically Smart Protein 101 as we call, and we have on the panel Dr. Neelu Srivastav from DBT, Prachi Agarwal who joined us from BIRAC and is online, right? And then we have Devo Mitra, if you can come to the stage. Yeah. And we have Preeta Tripathi from FIXI, the Sector Skill Council. We have Padma from GFI and Chandana from GFI, and if you can call everybody to the stage. Cool. I keep this mic or? Yeah. So Prachi, you are on. So I'll play multiple roles. I'll play the moderator and maybe the panelist also at times. Yeah. So one of our moderators has a sore throat, is unable to join today, right? So cool. So maybe a bit of a background. I mean, I already mentioned, but Neelu Srivastav, Dr. Neelu Srivastav, you just heard on the panel. Is she there or has she dropped off? Yeah, maybe dropped off. And then we have Dr. Prachi Agarwal, who's the senior manager technical from biotechnology, and from BIRAC. Yeah, so we have Neelu also here, and she's the smart protein expert in BIRAC. We've met a couple of times, so thanks a lot, Prachi, for being here. We have Devamitra Day here from Brabender. She works in the US, and for her PhD worked with Girish Ganjal and worked on extrusion. So we have very few PhDs around the world who've actually worked on extrusion technology. So she's like completely bred in this area of texturization of smart proteins. Thanks for being here. We have Preeta Tripathi, who we've been working for some time into, I mean, I think more than a year now, we've been talking about, year and a half, about how to create content around the whole processing of protein. So we now have a content ready, and hopefully through the panel, Preeta will talk about how do we launch this whole program around skilling in this area. We have Padma Ishwarya here, who pretty much we are in touch with. I think we speak maybe once or twice every week, and from GFI, the Science and Technology Specialist, and Chandana, also Science and Technology Specialist, and looking at a lot of the education and university networks, right, in the smart protein space. So yeah, with that, I think, as I said, we'll begin with the Smart Protein 101, right? And because one thing we haven't really spoken about is what is smart protein, right? So maybe that's where we begin. And the question to you, Chandana, what is smart protein and what is its relevance globally and in the Indian context? Is it different in the Indian context of the globe? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Neelu gave a brilliant overview on the importance of smart proteins, both from an environment perspective and for the global and national food security reasons. So keeping that presentation in mind, I would really like to emphasize that right now we are in the beginning of a decade for the smart protein industry to take off. And just for the audience, all proteins is what it's called globally. In India, we like to call it smart proteins because of how it's meant to be a smarter solution, because it might not be the alternative in the long run. With that context, I would like to talk about smart proteins from a sort of a 3 vertical modality, where we like to classify them as plant-based proteins, which is what today's session will mostly focus on, most of our workshop today. But the other 2 sectors of fermentation-derived proteins, we have Ashish ji from Perfect Day here. They are one of the few companies in the world that are trying to leverage the fermentation technology to create alternatives to animal proteins. And this is not biomimicking, but actually making the real protein from fermentation technology, and we'll hear more about that later today. And the 3rd vertical is cultivated meat, where the way we produce meat today is not very efficient, because you feed so much calories to an animal, and in the end, the output you get is only the meat portion of it, and the rest is just slaughtered. So that inefficiency in the current animal agriculture needs to be addressed, and that's what cultivated meat does, because you are focusedly only growing the edible part of the animal, which is the muscular tissue, the flesh. So cultivated meat does that by taking a biopsy of the muscle animal cells, growing that in vitro, expanding it in bioreactors, and giving you a three-dimensional muscle tissue that is perfectly safe and edible. It is exactly a replica of real meat. It's not fake meat. So that is something that is really cutting edge at the moment, and it's gained a lot of traction over the last few weeks and months because FDA has finally approved it as safe for consumption, and it's available. If you're ever traveling to the US, you will be able to eat cultivated meat at restaurants. So that is the future. I think the biotech and bioeconomy era is upon us, and this is why, from a global and in an Indian perspective, smart proteins is very vital. And I think I don't want to repeat what Dr. Neelu said because she gave a fantastic overview of the importance of smart proteins for our economy right now. With that in mind, yeah, we can probably move on to talking a bit more about the plant-based proteins with Padma.
Yeah. So I think thanks. Wonderful introduction to smart protein. So how are we asking these questions? Maybe just a word. Through the registration process, we had actually asked for questions, right? Every registrant had to give a question, and we have 800 registrations and about 600 questions. So we have a good sense now as to what India is thinking and what are the questions in India's mind around protein. So we've curated that, and Padma has been over this last week clustering these questions and arrived at a list for the 4 panels, and that's what we are kind of asking. So we're not really seeking questions today from an audience, we're sorry, but in a sense, these are audience's questions, right, itself, yeah. Cool, so the next one is around ingredients, right? So what are the various ingredients? And I think Neelu again, Dr. Neelu again introduced this, but maybe going a little deeper, what are the sources of, say, plant proteins that are popular today? And what are the techniques of extracting these out when we say that these are smart proteins now, right? Cool. Padma, if you can answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Gurmeet. So under the plant-based food, so I would categorize it further as plant-based meat, egg and dairy products. So accordingly, the plant-based meat products are dominated by 3 major sources of protein. Three major sources of protein, that is soy, pea and wheat gluten. So likewise for the plant-based egg, so the products are dominated by mung bean, chickpea and potato proteins. In the case of the plant-based dairy products, it is finger millet, then the nut proteins like almonds, so which actually predominate the plant-based milk products. But not limited to this, now the industry and also the researchers are looking forward to diversify this ingredient basket and also move towards more indigenous crops like millets, pulses, to serve as ingredients for these products. So this has a potential future scope of research, which we are also working, and we are suggesting this as white space opportunities for the researchers as well as the industry. So next comes the extraction process, because it is the extraction which determines the quality and the functionality of protein, which renders it more suitable for all these different categories of products. So the extraction can be done by different methods, which is based on the water requirement. It is classified as wet fractionation and dry fractionation. So under dry fractionation, we have methods like air classification, triboelectric separation. So these are more sustainable in terms of, because they require they don't require water and like minimal energy requirements. These are more sustainable ways of extracting protein, but they lead to lower purity, because like the other macromolecules are attached to this, but whereas the chemical processes like alkali extraction followed by isoelectric precipitation, they give a good yield and purity of protein. So there is actually a compensation that has to be struck between these 2 techniques. But we prefer more of physical techniques today to avoid to have clean label ingredients. So the industry is moving towards that. And in terms of functionalization, so the functional properties of proteins are very important, because those functional properties determine the end application of each of these proteins. So what these functional properties could be like which are of significance for the plant-based products are the water holding capacity, oil holding capacity, gelling ability, foaming capacity, emulsification. So these are some of the functional properties. For example, say for a plant-based milk product, the emulsification potential is very important. And in the case of egg products, the gelation property of these proteins are very important. So some of these proteins have inherently these properties attached to them, but for some we need to tune their functionality so that they become more suitable. So those approaches are called as the functionalization approaches or functional modification, around which a lot of work is going on. So there are different methods for the functionalization as well. It could be physical, it could be chemical, biological, it could be as simple as a thermal treatment, which is going to improve the solubility of protein, which is the base for all the other functional properties. Or it could be an ultrasonication based method or an enzymatic hydrolysis. So these are the different functionalization approaches which are used to tune the protein more suitable for the plant-based foods.
Thanks for that answer, Padma. And I think if you look at globally, the whole smart protein revolution with respect to plant protein started with soy and probably wheat and blends thereof. And if you look at more recent years, then pea protein is gaining in popularity as well. And Canada has invested quite significantly in pea protein. And so we really have to think of what is India's strategy going to be in terms of plant proteins, right? We have legumes, and we are pretty much using all the legumes that we are producing today, right? So, but India does have to offer a lot of diversity of legumes, and Darshanji mentioned there could be many reasons, right? For that, the humble mung dal has become a world favorite from a egg protein perspective, and maybe more. Desi chana is one of the lowest cost legumes, right? And what could we do with that? And is that a strategic importance in India? We have Sanjay ji here from Rudra, who's looking at rice protein, and that's another protein which will become really abundant as over the next few years, already beginning to become abundant, and will grow so because of that we are surplus in rice today, and we have given the freedom to convert the excess rice into bioethanol, right, which leaves almost pure protein behind. And so we will have another source. So from an Indian perspective, we really have to explore what are going to be the proteins which are going to become available. And we already working on them in R&D to see how they texturize, how they could be used for various other applications besides, say, meat analogs, because smart proteins have many other applications as well. And see how we take that whole story forward from an Indian perspective. But great. So we've covered what are smart proteins, we've covered what are the sources, and now the next question is how do we texturize these, right? And specifically, extrusion is the big technology for texturization today. So maybe the right person, Devo Mitra. And what is the role and applicability of extrusion technology in developing texturized plant proteins, and especially in the context of, say, meat analogs, which is what has been the first application, right? Yeah.
Okay, so am I audible?
Yeah. You keep the mic close
Okay.
to your
Is
mouth.
this fine? Okay, so firstly, thank you all for attending the session today. And also, I would like to thank whoever is attending online. So just to begin with, I will just quickly introduce what extrusion is, and then
Yeah.
I'll come to the answer.
Right.
So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of what exactly extrusion processing is. So extrusion processing is a technique that uses high temperature, high shear, and it also uses like either high moisture or low moisture based on what application you're looking at. So when we talk about plant-based meats or plant-based meat alternatives, so we have two kinds of products. One is a low moisture meat analogs, which is also called as a TVP, which is texturized vegetable proteins. And the other one is called as the HMMA, which is the high moisture meat analogs, which is something that mimics the structure, or it looks like meat and it needs a lot of water for extrusion. So these are specifically the two products which we'll be discussing today in this panel. And about extrusion, it's again just one single unit. Everything happens in just one machine. You don't need separate units. Like for example, if you look at a dairy processing plant, you have multiple bunch of equipments. Like you have a homogenizer, you have a fermenter tank, and so on and so forth. So in case of extrusion, it's just one single unit which performs different functions, like it conveys your dry material, it mixes, it shears, and then it compresses your material, it transforms a powder to a dough, and finally what you see at the end is a final finished product. And further, depending on what application you're looking at, you can either fry that product, or you can convert that into a beef patty, whatever, like a patty or something of that sort. So that's basically what extrusion is. And now I'll be coming to the answer to the question that Dr. Singh had originally asked me. So when you look at extrusion processing, first it's very important that you know what ingredients you're using. So as Chandana and Padma talked about the ingredient functionality and the different kinds of smart proteins that we can use. So we have a bunch of options that you can use for proteins. Like you have the most common proteins that are used for making these kind of products are soy and wheat proteins. That has been done since the early 80s or 70s, I believe, and even much before that for making tofu. So I'll be just talking in the terms of like the 1970s and 80s. So initially soy and wheat was used, but as you know that soy and wheat are allergens. So that's the reason, I mean, some people are allergic to those two proteins. So it's not favorable to use those ingredients for extruding products. So that's the reason we are looking at alternative sources. One of them is peas, then we have rice proteins, as you mentioned in this panel. Then we have also the lentil proteins, the red lentil proteins, chickpeas also, and then mung bean protein is another thing that is another popular ingredient for making these kind of products. And so as just coming back to what Padma also said, that it's very important that you know the functionality of what proteins you're looking at, to what's the water absorption capacity of that particular protein, or how well it emulsifies or how well it can gel. So that helps you to understand how you can use the knowledge that you gain from your lab experiments to see how it can actually texturize or not, whether it's fit for making like a plant-based meat product, or it is fit for dairy application, or it is fit for any other application as such. So that is something that we usually look at when it comes to extrusion processing, whether the protein is fit to be extruded or not.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Yeah. And so maybe one follow-up question here. What causes, so you take a lentil protein, and if I cook dal, it is very pasty and mushy, right? What happens in the extrusion process that this mushiness actually transforms into a fibrated, a fibrous kind of a structure? Yeah.
So that secret is something called as the cooling die. So basically, if you look at extrusion, it's like a closed chamber in which you have different kind of screws. So these screws help you in making the cooking process quicker. So if you look at making dal in the pressure cooker, let's say it takes around 30 minutes. But if you do the same process in extrusion under a highly pressurized environment, high temperature, and under high shear conditions, this process that happens in 30 minutes can happen under 5 minutes. So that's the difference. That is something that happens in extrusion. It helps you in quick transformations of your ingredient, like you put a powder into the extruder, that gets converted into a dough, and finally what you get outside is a texturized product. And now coming back to how the texturization happens, that's because of this die, so we call that as a cooling die. So that basically helps to bring all the proteins together which was disrupted or transformed during cooking. So there is this mechanism with which I won't be getting too much into detail of that mechanism, but just to give you like an overview. So with that mechanism, we bring all the proteins together. Basically, they are stitched together, and then it forms a texture. Then when you just tear it off, like longitudinally, you see those fibers, and that's what we call as a meat-like structure. So yeah.
Cool, great. So actually, that's the one thing which kind of attracted me. Why did I get into that area, right? I mean, my initial hook into the area was not that, hey, I want to save the world through sustainability, or I want to change the health map of India. My initial was just this simple thing that, hey, how does this mushiness transform into fibrous structure? No, that kind of fascinated me. As a kid, heating an egg and looking that liquid going into a boiled egg or a scrambled kind of a structure, that used to entice me as a kid. And I never thought that we could do similar structural transformations with a dal, right? And so when I first saw videos of that and pictures of that, that kind of got me interested in that area. And it was the physics and the chemistry, and then, of course, the reason you really want to invest your life into it is all the other add-ons, that what all can it do from a human perspective, from a societal perspective, and from a planetary perspective. Yeah. But thanks for that. Yeah, introduce. The question to Padma now again. Yeah, on product quality and safety, right? Why? And maybe many often when we go on the web and talk to people, we are talking about smart proteins in the context of animal meat, right? And saying these are all. So, but these are plant-based products. Why do we call them plant-based meats, or no? Are they different from animal meat? Are they meat? Why this terminology?
This is a very important and of course a popular question that we face, like why do we call it plant-based meat? Because like plant-based meat can reliably and predictably substitute the animal meat consumption, and they have the capability to replicate the cultural and sensory consumer experience. So the nomenclature plant-based meat is the most appropriate one, because it informs the consumer of the nature of the product, that it is plant-based, the source is plant, and then what is the end use? It is going to replicate the animal consumption. So that is why we consider that this term plant-based meat is very appropriate, because it informs the consumer what really they are eating, what is the source, and what they can expect. So they can expect a flavor experience which can replicate meat. So that is why this nomenclature is justified.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I think an interesting aspect, I listened to a few podcasts, right? And I follow a scientist out of Stanford, Christopher Gardner, who's one of the leading authorities on proteins, right? And the kind of studies he's been doing over the last 40 years are quite fascinating, and would encourage anybody in the protein area to actually follow Christopher Gardner from Stanford. Yeah, and he's part of an organization called Menus of Change. Yeah, and with the idea that can scientists and chefs, so it's a scientist and chef collaborative, right? And can they together, if coming together, can they impact the health of, they're looking at America largely. And so he's done a lot of studies on looking at plant-based proteins and plant-based meats specifically. And in our diet, if we massively change, and this is from an American perspective, we are not a meat-eating country like America, right? What impact would it have, right? Is it, because that's the question everybody asks, is it a real replacement? Is it full nutrition? Are we losing out on things, right? And what about fat? What about salt? And other things which may be getting added in plant-based meat. So the number of interesting clinical studies, I will not summarize them, but for anybody who's interested in this debate, to go and look up some of his papers, largely a scientific audience here. So remember the name Christopher Gardner, and Menus of Change, and read up some of the key papers that he's written there. Cool. Okay, so that was our starting of 101 on smart protein, and now maybe 201. We next to the next year, right? We graduate to the next year. So first question, and Padma, we come back to you. And maybe what are the stages involved in plant-based meat processing? And I know Devumitra elaborated, touched upon that a little bit, and if you can just elaborate a little more, right, on this aspect.
Yes, so most part of this question has been answered, but I would just add like what was not dealt with. So the plant-based value chain has basically 3 stages. So one is the crop selection and optimization. Second is the ingredient optimization, and third one is the end product manufacturing. So first of all, we have to choose the crops, the raw materials, and then like tailor them or engineer them so that they become suitable resource materials for the plant-based foods. So that is the first stage of the value chain. So the crop can be optimized for mostly it is done to improve the yield, but there is scope beyond that to improve the protein content, or it could be engineered so that like it becomes more extractable. The protein becomes easily extractable, and also tuning the amino acid composition of the protein source. So these are some of the ways in which the crops can be optimized towards more suitability. And second step is the ingredient optimization. That is, we extract or isolate the fraction that we are interested in, say protein, or it could be the other macromolecules like starch or fat. So extract the material of interest from the rest of the matrix, and then functionalize it, that which I already spoke about. So that is the second stage. And the third one is the end product manufacturing. So in case of plant-based meat, it is extrusion, which is the popular technique for production. In case of plant-based milk, it is the homogenization process, which develops the product. So likewise, and there are also other emerging techniques that are at the lab scale, which still has to see the lab to land transformation, like techniques like 3D printing, electrospinning. So these are the techniques that need to be optimized at a commercial scale. So these are the three stages of the plant-based value chain. So with this, I have a question to Dr. Gurmeet. So regarding the ingredient optimization, so we already spoke about the predominance of soy in the industry. So what is that quality which makes soy very special and suitable for this? And what is the way forward in diversifying from soy to the other plant-based ingredients?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. I think that's on the mind of most people, and I don't think anybody really has an idea why soy works so beautifully, right? All of us have some theories to it, but I don't think any scientist today has an idea. So we worked with about, I think in our lab, more than 20 different kinds of protein concentrates, protein isolates, soy, pea, wheat gluten, microbial proteins, algal proteins, rice proteins, cashew proteins, chickpea proteins, and so many variants of these, right? And the best textures that we get are with soy protein and wheat protein blends, and then pea protein, right? And of course, trying to see the untexturizable, right, proteins such as the rice proteins so far, cashew proteins. Why can't we texturize them, right? Why don't we create the kind of fibrous networks, the kind of anisotropy, which is the properties of what is meat, right? Is that you cut in one direction versus you cut in another direction. They cut very differently, just like wood, right? You cut along the fiber or across the fiber, and it takes a whole lot of different effort, right? So meat is fibrous. That's what we mean by anisotropy. And soy seems to give the best anisotropy. So we have various thoughts as to why this happens. There are 3-4 theories in literature also about why fibration happens. The need for two different phases to form using biopolymers, right? And whether they are, so you have two different protein polymers from two different sources, or you have maybe a polysaccharide, which is another polymer, and a protein polymer coming together. They need to have enough anionic species to create interlinkages. There need to be enough maybe covalent and non-covalent bonds. So covalent, like say maybe the disulfide bonds between the various amino acids, the hydrophobic bonds, which are there. So many things. And what all of us in this community are doing is to try and understand that what are the kind of linkages which are happening between one protein molecule and between one protein sheet and another protein molecule. Because what is happening during the protein, literally, if you think of maybe simplistically, not just literally, is that you have plant proteins are typically globular. They are like tied up very tightly like a ball, right? Whereas animal proteins are fibrous, so they are stretched out, right? Like a myosin or an actin, etc. So what are we trying to do in the plant is that we are trying to heat it up and open up this ball, right, into this kind of a structure, right? We open them up into sheets. And then these sheets, we want to align them, because initially when you open them up, they're all like haywire. But as they move through a channel, a very narrow channel, they start getting aligned from here to they start coming together like this. And once they have been aligned in this channel, you need to get them to cross-link or bind to each other so that the structure starts becoming stable. And for that, you need them to come together a little bit, and you want to cool them. So you have, the next step is to actually cool them together. That's the high moisture meat analog process, very simplistically, not absolutely, not exactly correct, but explains the principle. There's the other one, which is a dry TVP, which is that you want to create a network that to happen, but then you want to fill it with a lot of gaps, right? You want to expand it, right? And to do that is the simplest way to expand anything is that you have a lot of water to begin with, right? You make the temperature very high under a high pressure so that the water doesn't evaporate, right, inside that high pressure chamber. But the moment it comes out, it flashes because it sees from 100 bar pressure down to 0 bar, right, outside, 0 bar gauge. And that massive jump, causes the steam to flash away, and you are left with a very porous structure which hopefully will not collapse. So there is a souffle technology almost. You don't want the souffle to collapse, which means that the strength of the binding holds even when the water disappears and it doesn't collapse back into a very solid structure, right? So the earliest technology was the Nutri-Nuggets technology, and therefore the understanding of proteins has been about 50 years of protein processing from the spongy end, and a lot of that work on soy, which is why we are leading the space in soy, and we have not really mastered why we can't texturize rice protein. But what we have been able to do is that we've been able to combine rice proteins and all other non-texturizable proteins with the soy and the pea proteins and the wheat glutens, almost up to 30-40% now, right? In our lab, Abdul and Manoj, they're not in this room, but Abdul, Manoj, Sahil, Bharat, Sahana, this team over years has been able to incorporate levels of to almost 50% of non-texturizable proteins with texturizable and still be able to create very nice, juicy, textured matrices, right? But the exact reason why soy is number 1 and pea number 2, I don't think anyone can answer. Hopefully, in the next few years, I keep saying that the next 2 years of my research life, I want to devote on 100% non-texturizable proteins and see can we texturize that. And if we can do that, that'll be a big breakthrough. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So next question, right? We look at, you spoke about the twin screw extruder, right? And if I look at where I mentioned the Nutri-Nugget technology that maybe many of us kids, our parents tried to feed us, but we never liked it, right? That seemed to come off a single screw extruder, right? Maybe. So what is this twin screw extruder and what is a single screw extruder? And not just from a principle, but from a cost, and also they're extremely different. And why should I go to a twin screw extruder and not a single screw extruder when it's at 1/10 the cost maybe available? And so maybe if you can shed maybe question to Devumitra there. Yeah.
Sure. So as the name suggests, single screw meaning there's just one screw in the whole system, and twin meaning that there are 2 screws in the system. So now you can think about it, when you have 1 screw versus 2 screws, the mixing action would be much, much, much better with 2 screws. So now if you're looking at extruding proteins, you really need to mix your proteins well, and you need to make sure that the proteins are broken down completely so that at the end you can form these nice textures. With single screw, that's not possible. So single screw, I would say that in terms of application, they are really good for making direct expanded products, which is basically the expanded snacks like Cheetos or products like Kurkure. They are very good for those kind of products, or even pet food and fish feed. They are really good for that. But if you're looking at making texturized proteins or even TVPs, I think twin screws are the winner here because of the higher capacity. And of course, you can make more modifications to the system, because if you're buying an extruder, you would definitely want it to do multiple functions and not just do one function, right? So with twin screws, you can change the way you want to cook your proteins. Like you can either add more shear to it, or if you want that there should be more pressure generated in the system, you can add elements to that. Then with extrusion, it's a very, I would say, very versatile processing system where you can manage multiple processing parameters at a single go. Like for example, if I'm running, let's say, soy protein. So in case of soy, as also Dr. Singh said, that there has been immense work done on soy, and nobody knows that why it texturizes better than any other protein, for example. So just I would like to add one anecdote here. So when it comes to extruding soy proteins, in my lab, I can close my eyes and extrude soy proteins. But if it comes to, if somebody gives me a rice protein, I'll run away from there. I would not do it. because it's difficult, that's why. So, of course, I'm not saying that it's not possible. It is possible, but of course, with adding other elements to it, like for example, adding wheat gluten or soy to that formulation with rice protein, that helps in extruding. So, yeah, so in terms of that, if you're looking at making texturized products, then definitely twin screws are better. And you also said that in terms of cost, twin screws are much higher as compared to single screws. So that comes with the high cost because it gives you more flexibility, right? So that's another thing added to why that twin screw extruders are much more costlier. And I was also talking about the changes that you can do while you're running the system. So for example, with extrusion, it's a high temperature process. So you would want your proteins to be processed at a very high temperature, and additionally you need higher amount of shear that needs to be input in the system, which means that you need to have like a high power motor. Only if you have a high power motor, then you can have more energy in the system, and that helps you to break down your proteins much better. Rather, let's say it helps you to cook your proteins in a much better way. And then additionally you need different kinds of dye, or basically a dye is something that helps you to shape the product. If you want like a TVP like product, it's a different kind of, say for example, a circular round dye, so which means that you are cooking your proteins under high pressurized conditions, and then you're pushing them out through this small round dye opening, which gives you the texturized products or the TVPs, which is expanded, as you mentioned, Dr. Singh. And the other product which we spoke about, the high moisture meat analogs, which is also the meat alternative products. For that you need a different kind of a dye. It won't be extruded using like a TVP dye. You need a cooling dye for that, because you need to make sure that the mass of protein that you have cooked, which is highly viscous, that needs to cool down, and also it needs to align properly to make those products. So for that reason you need to significantly cool down this material, which was processed at, let's say it was processed at 120 degrees Celsius, but you need to cool it down to at least like a 50 degrees or 30 degrees Celsius so that you get those products. So this is essentially the difference between the single screw and twin screw. I'm sorry, I digressed a bit, but yeah.
That's cool. Thank you. Yeah. I think so. Those are almost, you can think of in terms of probably generations, no technology. We are so familiar with the 1G, 2G, 3G in the mobile phase, and 5G. I guess the 1G was the simple single screw extruder, a short L by D, very short L by Ds, right? And then moving on to longer L by Ds, then moving on to twin screw extruders, and then long L by D twin screw extruders, almost 100 bar pressure, then heating dies, further heating to get to 100 bar pressures and 150, 160 degree temperature, and then finally to the high long L by D and the cooling die, right, together. So almost I think it's the 5th generation, and we've gone from expanded products which were used as meat extenders to maybe denser hydrating products which are used as dry TVPs, to high moisture, which can now be almost be like meat chunks, and as opposed to only for minced meat applications. So we're moving along the G's here as well. Right? So I guess we've been talking about largely plant proteins, and we want to bring Chandra in here and look at what are these. There are plant proteins is probably one pillar of the smart protein, right? There are the fermenter proteins, and there are the cultured proteins. And so how do they come into the picture, if you could just talk about that?
Yeah, that's actually a very important way to look at this. So we've been hearing about the challenges with diversifying plant protein sources for extrusion. So trying to widen the picture a little bit more, there are other novel sources of protein that we can mix with plant-based proteins to get novel textures that haven't been explored before. For example, there are fermentation-derived microbial protein powders which have very novel functional properties, and this is still an area that is new and being explored. And this is what we call hybrid products. It's not just plant-based sources, not just fermentation, not just cultivated. So it's sort of a spectrum where we can imagine smart protein products to have a little bit of fermentation-derived novel ingredients, maybe some cultivated cells in plant-based scaffolds, texturized scaffolds, to give that final meaty feel or texture. And so that's one example of hybrid product where you have interplay, very close interplay of all these verticals of smart proteins. So that line between these types of fermentation or cultivated and plant-based is really fading, because hybrid products are the future. So fermentation has this other very cool capability where you can derive specific flavors, specific colors, pigments to mimic animal meat or dairy proteins, for example. You can produce that without the animal source. I think Impossible Foods in America is a great example of where they used precision fermentation technology to produce a heme protein which is not from animals. So they add this heme protein, which is fermentation derived, into their plant-based meat product to give that meaty umami flavor. Another example is these days they are making fats. Animal fats are made through precision fermentation, and these fats can go into plant-based products to give that animal flavor and organoleptic properties. Dairy proteins is another example where you don't need an animal anymore to produce dairy proteins. You can use microbial cells as factories to make any kind of protein you want. That's the power of the genomic abilities we have today, where we can functionally produce any type of protein in any host organism that we want. Finally, for cultivated meat, 100% cultivated cells can't really give you that whole meat texture. So people, what they are thinking of doing now is to seed these cultivated cells into plant-based scaffolds or mycelial scaffolds to give that hybrid feel of it's not just animal-based. It'll be for the first time where an animal product has fiber in it. So there'll be plant-based fibers in a cultivated meat product. So it's both. It has the goodness of meat at the same time with the plant-based fiber built into the product. So this is how we envision the future of the all-protein sector to be, where all these three, fermentation, cultivated, and plant-based proteins will complement each other and give rise to novel products, novel textures, and novel nutritional content, which we haven't seen before. So there's a lot of scope for growth here.
Cool, thanks. I think we have Ashish here from Perfect Day, who will talk about some of these other proteins that Channa just mentioned. We also have String Bio, Ganesh Kumar, who is the CFO of String Bio, who are into microbial proteins, and their team, Ravi, Preeta, right, and Jagdish are also here. So please take a chance if you move around, you have some time to go around and talk to these teams. They are on campus here. We also have a twin screw extruder. If anybody is excited enough to have a look at how it looks and how it operates, then we have the pilot plant right in the next building. Please walk over. There are people there. There are 15 science stations around the university today, all working on some aspect of plant proteins, right from, say, the pilot plant, the texturization, to the kitchen where the productization is happening, to the texture analysis machine, to an FTIR, which looks at whether the beta sheets are there or the alpha helixes are there, and what is the ratio and what kind of transformations there. So there's interesting pieces and interesting stories that are being told around each one of them. So please take some time to go around also and get a feel of all the things that we do. Now I think I'll switch gears a little bit and bring in this all important. So we all realize this is a sector which is growing, right? It's the start of, very rarely we have been seen start of new sectors. So this is the start of a new sector, and it requires, for it to succeed, it requires new skills, right? So how do we skill India, So maybe, Preetaji, how do we skill India in this emerging sector space? Yeah.
Thanks, Guruji, for having us here. And we've been hearing a lot about there will be a rise, and we are seeing an increase in the plant-based protein sector in our country and globally as well. And I think India is catching up, and there is a lot of scope. So as rightly as you are asking me, how do we develop the skill pool? If we have a look at how many startups or how many industries have entered into the plant-based protein sector over the last couple of years, you'll see that the numbers have gone up quite a lot, right? When we are talking about industries, how do the industries survive? What is the one basic requirement that they need to be in operation? They need skilled manpower. So if you don't have trained and skilled manpower, you can have the best of products, you can have the best of ideas, but until and unless you are producing it in some good quantities which you can sell, you'll not be making any profits, or you'll be just stuck at a R&D stage. है ना? So this is where the gap is, and this is what we from Fixie are trying to mitigate. And I'm very excited and thrilled to tell all of you that we have recently launched a course with insights and inputs from GFI and a lot of inputs from Dr. Gurmeet ji. So this particular job role is plant-based protein technician. Okay, and there are two ways where we are running this course. We'll be starting the first session at TDU. Most likely from August onwards, end of August, that is when we are starting. So little bit more about what this course is all about and who can avail these courses. So this plant-based protein executive, okay, so this particular course, it is it has been authorized by NCVT, which is the National Council for Vocational Education and Training, and we are running it as an extra credit courses with many universities. For this, it will be like an elective which students who are in their bachelor's or master's in any of the biological science domain, be it food science, nutrition, microbiology, biochemistry, they can take this course. And for them, this will be a 60-hour program where 20 hours will be a theory class, which can be conducted in a online, offline, or in a hybrid mode. And the remaining 40 hours is a hands-on practical workshop. So the first workshop that we are planning is going to be conducted in TDU under the able guidance of Dr. Gurmeet ji. And this course, the hands-on practical will take the students through the various stages of a plant protein production. Because if we are looking, and if we are foreseeing that this industry is going to grow at a very high pace, we are in need of, students and the workforce, that do know what this process and this technology is all about. Right now, if you look around any other courses that are running in the food sciences, you don't have a very specific course that talks about plant-based proteins for starters, right? So where do we get in that information? This is where Fixie comes in, and we get this course. I'll be sharing more details, over the day today, and once the panel is over, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions if you have for this course, and we'll be providing more details, I think, through this forum also, where you can go through and see what are the different components of this particular course. And if this course is not running in the universities as an added elective, this course will be starting at different locations. We are in the process right now in tying up with other universities and other R&D centers where this can be run as a standalone course of 510 hours. That's roughly 6 months or so. Okay, so we are looking to do our bit in getting this knowledge base and create more skilled and informed individuals targeting at students, because that is the right age or the right time, where we can bridge in that knowledge gap and give out this information.
Cool. Thank you. So, Pitaji, how many students in your network, how many universities in your network, and how many
So-
industries that you
Yeah.
right in your network, just
Okay.
to get an understanding
So
of how.
right now we have MOUs with around 25 universities and all the BWOC colleges, that run any food processing course. So we have what do you say, an MOU or some sort of an agreement with more than 250 BWOC colleges across the country. So this is where apart from the plant-based proteins, so we have another 69 job roles that cater to different sectors of the food processing where these courses are run. And when we talk about the industry connect, as we are the sector skill council of a food processing industry, we are mandated by the government to provide skilled manpower to each and every sector of the food processing industry. So if you ask me what is the industry connect that we have, it runs into thousands.
Thousands of-
Yeah.
So massive. No?
Yeah, and but having said that, our target area, to provide skilled manpower, that what we have gauged and what we have, what we have been working on is for mostly the MSMEs, that need a lot of hand holding and a lot of support when it comes to aligning, skilled manpower and addressing addressing the gaps of their existing employees, providing them courses, which aid in upskilling of their existing workforces, and more so these courses that I just keep on talking about, we have it in an online and offline mode, but we also have a learning management system wherein we keep on adding newer courses all the time. And apart from such courses, we do a lot of events. We do webinars and podcasts. We've already done one webinar with Dr. Gurmeet on plant-based protein, and I'm in talks with GFI, to do a series of video podcasts that will be available, for students and professionals who are working in this domain, and will be touching base on many critical topics and points, and would try to sort of make one single platform wherein all the information, if you're talking about plant-based protein, and we are planning to make that available for everyone. So I hope we'll be able to do that pretty soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I think a very wide network, and with Fixie taking this as a priority area, we can truly create an impact, right? Yeah.
I think we have not yet mentioned that the growth that we are foreseeing in the plant-based protein is going to be double by 2031.
Yeah.
In just 7 more years.
Correct.
But I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah. So I think, and that sets up perfectly to bring in Prachi and Neelu, right? And I think Neelu mentioned in her starting. So Prachi, I'll be asking next question to you. So if you can start unmuting, yeah, if you're there, yeah. So I think Neelu mentioned that more than 100 startups have come up in this area, and I think that's largely because of DBT, DST, BIRAC playing this role and creating the funding opportunities to create a very vibrant startup scene in this area. We have String Bio here, which got seeded by DBT, BIRAC grants, right? And it's now a very well-funded startup, one of only 2 or 3 companies globally. So it's a world leader coming out of the support by BIRAC and DBT. So question to you, Prachi, that what are what role is BIRAC playing? What are the funding opportunities that students here or startups here in the audience and globally have in this space? And these are the big schemes that you have, and I know there's an announcement out even right now. If you can just elaborate what are the opportunities and what role BIRAC is playing in this seeding this area. Prachi.
So, thank you, Dr. Gurmeet, for inviting me to this panel, and I'm happy to share my views of what BIRAC has been doing and how we are being instrumental in this area of smart proteins. So already BIRAC, under the BIG funding, which is Biotechnology Ignition Grant. We have taken up certain projects based on this plant-based meat. So some of the companies have been already funded, like Femtoferrad is there, then Myoworks. They people are working. Femtoferrad basically is working on pea shrimp. So they are making some faba bean based products which look like a shrimp. So they have texturized it in a manner that it looks like a, and the feel and the taste of that product, final product is like a shrimp. And second, we have already funded is Myoworks, which has been working on scaffolds, edible scaffolds, which will be a platform, which is a platform technology, which will they will be using free media, and these scaffolds, with the help of the development of meat products, we can actually make a desired shape for the meat based plant meat based products. So others are also in line, and they have been working. Plant egg based protein already have been funded. So there is like a good bit of projects we are getting, but the knowledge, the scientific data available with the PIs or applicants, that is not enough for us to like whatever has been said before also, like what Chandana and what Padma talked about, that there needs to be there needs a development in the skill area. So people don't know much about how this process goes on. So in that area, we had already had a challenge call also, in which alternative meat-based proteins were main we had a call for that area. So we got good amount of projects in that area, but surprisingly, the applicants didn't share their preliminary data with us, because might be they are not confident enough that as it is it's being a new area, and they don't really have an IP on that. So because of that, might be the reason was basically they didn't had much work on that, and this they applied as in a concept and thought of BIRAC will fund forward. But that was not the case. Then again, BIRAC has been instrumental in organizing and has been working on the policy paper for this smart proteins. So the regulatory being a major part of that. So we have been, me and Nilu have been working on that policy document, and in a big way now with DBT and BIRAC, we are coming into the biomanufacturing ecosystem. So this is all like how BIRAC is coming along in this area. Over to you, Dr. Gurmeet.
Thanks, Prachi, for that overview and the fundings that have already happened. Do you think, Prachi ji, that given the excitement that I see, or at least no, that we have a full room here and outside as well, and so many people logged on, the excitement in the area, that are there going to be like smart protein focused funding opportunities maybe coming up, or some schemes getting launched in the future? What do you see? How?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we are, like I can't name them, but we are collaborating with certain institutes which have state-of-art facility with them, and with them only we will be inviting for proposals, and we'll be announcing a call which will be specifically on smart proteins.
I guess we need to figure out how to get on that list. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you please be ready, and like BIRAC, you can visit the BIRAC website for further details.
Yeah.
So it will be soon, like we are in process of discussion, and definitely will come forward.
Thank you so much, Prachi, for that view.
Thank you.
I think Neelu has had to leave, right? I have a message that Neelu had to leave, so but she gave a fantastic overview in the inaugural address, right? So I think with that, kind of we come to the end of our first panel discussion. You have a question? Okay, so maybe we'll have one question. We are not really set up for questions, but let's, yeah, since we have 5 minutes maybe. Yeah, Naj.
Earlier in 90s, soybean was being promoted, telling that that is the best protein. Soybean milk has been promoted so many other places. Now, last 6 years before, I saw a paper that don't take too much of soybean milk because it will change female physiology and it may lead to some sort of cancer. Such sort of work we are looking at or not? That's right. I just thought that
So yeah, there are a lot of people looking at for all the proteins, not just soybean proteins, as to what are the pros and cons, and what is the effect of those proteins on human biology. One thing I just wanted to clarify here is, smart proteins are a little different from whole foods, right? Because you have separated out the protein from the non-protein, right? It is taken some of the non-protein elements out. So you have to review this whole literature differently again, right? So, I mean, it's just like what are the properties of paneer versus the paneer water, right? Which comes out of it. They're very different fractions. And so you can't have compare milk with ghee or with paneer. They are extremely different things, right? There is lactose here, there is no lactose in ghee, right? So things have to be evaluated differently. And I think there is always a lot of single paper which may take our thinking to one point, but the job of a scientist is to read the full perspective around it, do a meta-analysis of all, and then arrive at a justifiable conclusion based on their reading, right? And so it's a very complex area, and I think will require a very a long discussion. And there will be opinions on both sides, there will be data on both sides. But yeah, it is an important one to address from a consumer perspective, right? Yeah. But I think with that, with that one question, we'll call this panel to a close. And thanks a lot to all our panelists. Thanks to Prachi for joining and being with us for more than an hour or so. Thanks so much, Prachi, and for your support. And
it's our pleasure, Dr. Singh, to be a part of this event, because definitely we need to promote this area in a bigger way, because people don't understand, they confuse smart proteins with super proteins. So there is a need to make people aware about what are actually smart proteins. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I think just one last word, I mean, maybe before I step off, is, we've had more than 100-year history of almost 100% pure carbohydrates being available. No sugar, starches, right? You can go and buy sugar, 40 rupees a kg maybe, right? 60 rupees a kg, 100% carbohydrate. You can buy starch powders as well, right? Corn starch was an earlier one, but today so many starches are available. 100% carbohydrate. You can go out and buy 100% oil, right? Readily available. 100 years since these two things have become mass market, and therefore there's a lot of cooking expertise which has become available with these 100% resources, right? So many structured foods which have 100% dairy fat, this is ghee, right? So many products with 100% oil that we know how to use them, how to structure them, how to emulsify them, various things, right? 100% protein or even 60-70% protein is just becoming available, right? Even today, we cannot go to a shop and buy a 60% protein, right? I have to order a whole sack, 20 kgs. Maybe unless I order 100 kgs, 5 sacks, nobody's going to send it to me, right? So this is just the start. When we say this is a sunrise industry, this is just the start of protein industry, and it will become available just like why we are buying sugar and we are buying oil and we are buying starches. Proteins will become available at the consumer level, right, at a affordable price. You can buy proteins today, whey protein, 2,000, 5,000 rupees a kg ka box milega, but it will become available at a price where all of us will become familiar with it, will be cooking with it, will be transforming, and many new ideas will come up at that stage, right? And that's one of the angles on protein that we should keep in mind, and that's the reason we are all together here. That's an emerging. When we say it's an emerging industry, that's the emerging part of it. So thank you so much, Preeta, Devomitra, Chandna, right, and Padma, and we now will start with the next panel, the industry panel. Yeah, 5-minute break, comfort break, and then assemble quickly again for the industry panel. Thank you.
Hello, check. Hello, check. Live, can I pause? Vinay, live, should I pause? Let it go. Hello, check. Hello, check. Hello. Hello. Hello, check. Hello. Hello. Check. Hello, check. Hello. Hello, check. Hello, check. Hello. Just Amit.
He's saying if Prachi is there, let him be online. We can remove Usha.
Okay, wait. Let me check. Amit. Hello.
No, he's done. He's there.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon, Amit sir. Are you able to hear us? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Once start, we will let you know.
My eyes. Without eyes. Okay, request everybody to settle down. We'll start our next panel. Yeah. Hi, so requesting everyone to settle down as we call our next panel, the Consumer and Category Meet of the Market panel, where we have industry and business represented. We have Dr. Amit Chakravarti is already online. Welcome, Amit. Yeah, I'm told you have connected already. Amit heads the R&D Reliance Consumer Products. Yeah, and he's
Hi, Govind.
hi, Amit. Yeah. And with the great ambitions of becoming 50,000 crores, 75,000 crores in 5 years, and Amit is leading the product development. So thanks, Amit, for finding the time. I'm sure you must be very stressed or will have a high workload with such high ambitions for the company. We have Dr. Ashish Paratkar just stepped out. Oh, yeah, Ashish here. Right. If you can come on. Ganesh Kumar, CFO for String Bio. Chitra Nair, she's the Director Product Technology at Thinking Folks. Dr. Suresh Ramamurthy, right, Chief Scientist at ITC, heads the Discover Research World there. Simran Bhasin, yeah. I keep missing an E in her spelling, right? In this age of everything is E and I, E technologies, right? And former business head for alternative proteins at Licious, and Vrinda Patel, yeah, head connected innovations R&D Tata Consumer Private Limited. So thanks everyone, yeah, for being here in the panel. Yeah, and you will have to bear with me. I seem to have had be delegated the job to moderate all the 4 sessions. As I said, one of our moderators is not feeling well, has a sore throat, and so she's unable to join. Cool. So this panel, as you said, is consumer and category, the meat of the market, right? And this panel here is probably leading this revolution for India, right? If we have the technology which is getting ready, right? The scientists and the researchers are working on trying to create these proteins which we call as smart proteins, because they will hopefully solve multiple problems, challenges that we face, right? The health challenges, the environmental challenges, the societal challenges, and we'll enumerate about these challenges a little more as we delve deeper into this session. But how do we scale these, right? And that requires industry, and these are the leading industry partners who are experimenting with products in the market, experimenting with bringing new materials, available to create those products, understanding what are the needs of India, right, in this place. While globally we do understand what the drivers are for the smart protein space, but is the Indian context the same or is it different? So that's the learning that this panel has, that we will at least ask what insights have they gained from being in this market, in the industry world, in commercial, looking at consumers and how Indian consumers are interacting with these products. So we begin at this consumer end, and first question to Simran, right? In this whole smart protein space, if we start reading the literature, the published literature, the driver seems to have been the environment, right? In some sense. Now you did a lot of marketing work, and you were the business head for plant proteins, right? You took on that responsibility of being the business head for plant proteins, and seed this plant protein brand, the new brand that you created, right, as well, for Licious. So what were your experiences? What are the insights that you gathered of smart proteins in the Indian context? Yeah.
Thanks, Gurmeet. So, firstly, I think realize that the narrative for alternative proteins is going to be very different in India compared to the West. And I think one of the unique parts of India is that socio-culturally we are made up very differently. And because of this, our food habits are very different, not just as individuals, as families, and that becomes, I think, the largest influence for the kind of food habits we develop to a large extent. But triggers of environment, for example, that you mentioned, are perhaps at one of the lowest in terms of what is driving the adoption of alternative proteins. Over here, we see socio-cultural responses like spiritual adaptation, proactive health seek, social adjustment, and I'll explain a couple of these. These are the top three that we've seen here. Now, when I talk about spiritual adjustment, as a country, even the most hardcore meat eater eats meat only a couple of days a week. Right? Out of 21 meals in a week, you're only having 3 or max 4, right, on an average. Many meat eaters in the north, for example, will not eat meat on a Tuesday. Many meat eaters in states like Andhra Pradesh will not eat on a Thursday or not eat on a Saturday, right? For various religious sort of reasons that have been handed down the generations in the family. That's one. From a social adjustment point of view, I may not follow any of this. But if I have a family member at home, especially if it's an elder who follows this and does not eat meat on a Tuesday, in general, meat will not be served on the table on a Tuesday, right? And you adapt to that as a family. And then there are, I think from a health-seeking need and trigger, if we all look back, we've always been brought up with this very balanced view of consuming food, which is that meat jada mat khana, right? So have some dal, have some sabzis, have the dahi. So it's interesting, have some fresh fruit. We've had a very balanced upbringing, and none of this is sort of science or what we've been taught. It's just what's been handed down, right? And these are the largest reasons why people are now seeking alternate protein, right? That's the trigger. What they are adopting to, I think a large part is where brands have managed to get the taste right. That is aiding adoption, right? But I think environment, we were pleasantly surprised or sort of really shocked to see that it's very, very low. And perhaps if you look around, not very surprising, because environment is not the reasons that we lead so many of our decisions in the corporate world or in our personal lives, right? Because we're still a developing economy. I find that consumers in developed economies who have already achieved very high states of sort of basic infrastructure for living, etc., tend to starting having concerns on the environment or outside of their personal sphere.
Thanks. I think that's a very interesting perspective. A spiritual adjustment and a social adjustment, right? And it'll be great to actually put these things in publications as well, right? As because the publications, when you read the literature, you follow the literature almost single-mindedly. Everything begins with the first statement, right? As that environmental impact, right? And this perspective is missing, whereas it's extremely important here. Suresh, you wanted to jump in, right? To add on to that.
I thought it would be an interesting question as an add-on. Do you see the Indian population today as one population or multiple segments of population which could be needing different things? We talk of the Indian health scenario, which is the double-edged sword, right? One is the malnourished and the other is the overnourished in the context of protein.
Definitely multiple segments. There are many, many Indias, right? There is an India that needs to start eating more protein, and there's an India that needs to have a more balanced version of a protein. So there are different segments that have very different needs. You're absolutely right there.
Yeah. I think building on that, maybe question to Vrunda, where Tata's has been on a similar journey to Licious and launch their first set of products in this space. Yeah, what needs do you think are being addressed? What consumer need is being addressed through plant-based protein products?
Yeah. First of all, thanks Dr. Gurmeet ji for inviting us here on this panel. And I would just continue to the discussion, add on to the discussion that we just had. And consumer needs for sure, in a way, if you see, the consumers have two drivers today. One is the health drivers and the other is the social drivers, right? So social drivers, again, the spiritual aspect as well as the environment aspect. The second one is yet to pick up, but the first one, yes, definitely. And health drivers, because consumers are today much more aware. They do know that protein consumption is important for them, right? And coming to this point about what consumers actually are looking for and what are the drivers for them. So just to give you a context, so for us at Tata, this entry into this plant-based meat segment, so we launched this Simply Better plant-based meat last year. Exactly, and it gives me joy to tell you it's been exactly a year. Last year, July 2022 is when we launched this particular product range in the market. It has been very well received by the consumers, but honestly, there have been challenges. And so we have been having consumer feedback as well. So basis which we are trying to kind of constantly improve the product delivery. So consumers are looking for a better product delivery for sure, right? So, and if you ask me, there are three major drivers that we see today that may help address those unmet consumer needs and even drive more penetration, in terms of kind of more acceptance by consumers, more mass acceptance, more large-scale adoption of this category. So first and foremost, of course, the taste. And that's very, very crucial. The second is the price parity. The third one I would mention is, again, education to adopt this particular category. Right? So so if you see, the adaptation of this category in India has been relatively low, right? Especially given that we know protein is important, but again, we have our own kind of socio-cultural influences, basis which we make our diet choices, right? So that's one. Cost is very crucial. Cost is very crucial for that matter. So today, what we have also realized is the cost of these products versus the willingness of the consumer to pay is where is the major challenge that we need to address, especially in India when you have paneer and soy-based ingredients, which are at least 10 to 20% lower price than plant-based meats. Yeah. Coming to the adaptation part, what we believe is the real target here is the flexitarians. Again, that socio-cultural aspect that we just heard about. Plus, even specific days when you don't eat meat. and specific need states that a consumer may be having when they don't want to consume animal-based food, right? So flexitarians and not vegetarians are the targets here. So as an industry, we need to actually kind of tap into the real needs of a flexitarian and then address those needs of the flexitarian diet better to kind of help drive penetration of this category, right? Now coming to the most crucial one, which is the taste, of course. So taste is something which will get you repeat buyers at the end of the day. So taste, and I would say not just taste, the entire organoleptic characteristic of these products. I think we need, as an industry, we have some more distance and some more gap to bridge to kind of be there where the organoleptics, both the taste and texture, are more accepted by the consumers. Yeah, so that's one. One more thing that I would like to add, apart from the smart proteins, so as Tata, we have also forayed into this another big foray that we had last year. It was into a plant protein beverage powder, the GoFit range that we launched. So even we have learnings from there. So the major learning there is the consumers today, they are looking for some additional functional benefits. Be it any protein offering that you have, they are looking for something additional to that. It's not just protein. Yeah.
Suresh, would you want to chip in? Is ITC the other big company which launched a plant protein range, right? And tested the market as to where it is. So,
yeah,
any
sure.
thoughts,
I think,
insights?
I think I'm not an expert in protein. Nice to see you in a professorial role here. I think the key points are accessibility, affordability, then the cultural, socio-cultural issue, then the sustainability. And topping it all, when you talk food, taste is the king. Yeah, I think if you are not going to match the taste, it is like she said, repeat purchase. I think even a single purchase is you can be done with half a packet, right? So it's very important to be right on the taste part of it. You also said somebody was a chef in the audience. I think one of the advantages that ITC has is the master chefs that we have. And we have been experimenting quite a bit on this area, and many analogs have been attempted. And we have in the incredible range, we have the nuggets and the patties which are there, which are the plant protein based. ITC is testing the waters, is what I would say, and the feedbacks are very similar. Is very similar. I think it's all about affordability, the right taste. Where you want to segment, and the whole thought I asked her the question, are there different segments? Definitely there are different segments which the companies will have to choose where they want to really build a relationship with the consumer. I think is building the relationship with the consumer in this area is absolutely critical.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Hey, Amit, now Reliance is just setting up, its consumer brands, right? So as a company which is starting out in this space, what are your thoughts and perspectives around the whole smart protein space? Yeah. And if it interests you, why would it interest you? If it doesn't, why wouldn't it interest you? I thought but your perspectives, yeah.
Right. So we have just started in the FMCG space. So we are almost like a startup, even though we are backed by a large company. From our perspective, see, if you look at today's Indian market would be like we are 90% of the trade will still be in the fragmented trade, which you call Kirana. And about 10 to 11% of the trade, if you see, is going to be the modern trade, which includes our Reliance stores and of course every other big modern store. So obviously our first focus would be to win in the mass market because that's where the numbers are, that's where the volumes are. And if you look at leading players in the market today, Unilever, Nestle, ITC, GSK, they're all playing in those particular markets. And subsequently, of course, so we will have interest in going into areas where there are requirements. May not be a market that is ready, may not be a market that is very high in volume, but we will try to see how we can build certain areas. And in one of those areas, of course, protein is an important area in the country today. Now, I have a very different perspective on this artificial protein or meat equivalent, because currently, for a country like us, there are three elements. As someone said that, there are a lot of vegetarians and even meat eaters may not be an everyday meat eater, except say if you go to the east of the country or you go to Kerala, there are a few states which will be almost everyday meat eaters, but others are not. And number two, if you are eating meat and you are liking it, then of course it gives you a taste, a texture, a feel which you are enjoying. And if you want to replace it, you won't replace it due to just environmental reasons. I mean, this is our learning from across the globe. Even if you go to Europe, when you put environmental positive, it is everything equal and including price, and then that environmental positive drives that extra bit. But for that, the all the other benefits, including price, has to be parity. Where currently technology has not allowed us to be a state where we actually sell these at a price which is significantly lower or at par with the meat. And even today, if you look at the cheapest meat, will probably be chicken, and then the egg is the cheapest protein available, because the prices of pulses do fluctuate and at times are significantly higher for an average Indian to affordable, for make it affordable. And then that leaves you with these soy chunks and other kind of protein, soy protein based product, which in the affordable criteria which the consumer will be used. So the whole idea is, if someone has the ability to afford, then why will someone they move to this protein, unless we say that it gives you some extra benefits in terms of nutrition resources, or some extra benefit in terms of taste. Or why will and a guy who is not able to afford the meat at all, who is not, or even the pulses, how will he or she afford this particular protein? I think these are the key questions that we will have to answer. And we'll also have to answer then how we are going to address this, and how from using our knowledge, because today we are at a group, there is a lot of industry experts, there are also a lot of academic experts sitting here. And some of us would have spent about 20-25 years in science as well as in business, and the idea is how we crack these, where we make these alternate proteins available at a price where people can actually consume the protein, so that the protein deficiency goes out from the country. And soy chunks is a decent business, but soy chunks, we all know, we have had it, is that some of them are good, some of them are bad. The taste, texture, delivery may not be as we want it. So can we actually develop protein which comes at the right price, drives the affordability, drives the nutrition that the country needs? Because just based on sustainability, just based on environment, I don't think that is a huge traction, especially for a developing country like ours.
Thanks, Amit. I think very important points that you have made around, I think from everyone, what are the drivers, how they are different in India versus globally, and if we really want them to this area to become big, what are the bottlenecks today? Well, taste has to lead, but also the price point is coming. Like I think in everyone has mentioned that as a key bottleneck to make it to the masses, right? Simran, you picked up the mic. You wanted to add on something? Yeah.
I just wanted to add one point that I think will just amplify the impact that taste has on adoption in India, right? In the West, a typical dinner plate will have 70% meat and 30% are the sides. And an American once joked with me and said that the sides are also meat, right? So, and therefore, let's say if environmental concerns are very large, the trigger to actually replace that 70% is very high. And therefore, you're very actively looking, because you don't have a main course if you're not eating meat there, right? That's not the situation in India. If you look at our plate, on the days we eat meat, which is a couple of days a week for the meat eater, only 15% of our plate has animal protein. Okay? Now, if you take that away, there's still such a large variety of delicious food to eat. And this cuisine changes every 50 kilometers, right? So you talked about the many Indias, right? So let's say if environmental concerns become big, that 15% can be replaced very easily. We don't feel it, right? We are seeing a shift and move to vegetarianism today for, again, a variety of reasons that I won't get into right now. But it's very easy to transition to become a vegetarian today, right? Now, what all of this brings us down to is, what is going to be the real need and therefore the size of the market of plant-based meat in India, right? Because you're not fighting the battle that they're fighting in the West, where you're suddenly finding that I'm going to have an empty plate if I'm choosing not to eat animal protein, right? So here, if there's no taste, then you've lost the battle. You can do what you want with affordability. Perhaps affordability from the ingredient side may help in only one way. It'll help all of us in the industry to experiment a lot more to get at a better taste. But until we get to that better taste, there's no hope that we can make this larger, faster. It'll take time. It'll have its own organic growth. But I think we're dealing with a whole different set of challenges here that nobody really feels that I am. You know, yesterday for my daughter at her school function, they said send something traditional, to eat, and it must be vegetarian. So I said okay. Made some Kashmiri dum aloo, right? And otherwise, all Kashmiri food is a lot of animal protein. And I sat down to eat it, and it struck me that day, and I was thinking about today. I'm like, this is so delicious. I'm just not missing meat. And I'm a hardcore meat eater. Right? So imagine the battle that each one of us are facing, whether it's pani puri on one side or samosa chaat on the other side, or whatever else you have. You are not fighting meat, you're fighting food in general. And if you're not tasty, no one's going to make that emotional choice to have you on their plate. And finally, as consumers, we're all emotional choosers. After that, yes, there's a reassurance that, okay, I've had some protein or I've had some sort of ghee, but we're not saying I want to eat protein today, I want to eat carb today. There's a very small percentage who even know what is the nutrient composition of the food that they eat every day.
I think fascinating perspective that with the smart protein products, we are not just trying to get taste parity or superiority with meat, but with the dum aloo also, with all the other products also, because there are 7 other interesting things on the plate, right? And it's very easy to leave this out if it is not tasty, right? I see that with my daughter. Kuch aisa jo acha nahi hai, so that kind of gets left out. Everything else is taken. So that's a interesting perspective. Now, Chitra, next question to you. You work with a very wide set of customers, right, in developing new products at Thinking Folks. So you also work with a huge number of very small startups, right, as well. So while we've heard from the big players, and Lich's also calling as big as $1 billion, right? It's a unicorn now last year, right? So what has your experience been? And also looking at the point which is getting made, and I think Vrunda also touched upon it, that smart proteins, while a lot of the discussion is around meat analogs, but there is plant-based milk or other beverage category, and there could be other categories also, right? Snacks, etc., which have nothing to do with the fibrous texture. Right? It's still texture, but different kind of texture. So what is your perspective that you are gathering in this space?
True. So it's a large wide space. It's just not restricted to what we are talking around plant-based meat analogs and other extenders, right?
Mic close, yeah.
Is it fine?
Then you have to hold it close because
yeah.
sensitive to distance. Yeah.
So we, as part of Thinking Folks, of course, just a quick word around Thinking Folks. I mean, and we are a group of experts who sort of provide end-to-end solution to the industry today. So we work with a lot of startups. We also work with FMCGs alike. I mean, so we have been in this space and we have been seeing a lot of traction, a lot of development, a lot of brief that comes to us in this space, right? So not just plant meat, but it's all around milk, beverages, snack. So healthy snacking is something which has been around this whole protein space. So how how do you convert these? So let me use the word smart protein because that's the word today. So how can you convert some of these smart protein into better food matrices and formats that can have consumer attraction, right? Again, the choices are too many, and we are spoiled by that. So when you are looking at certain product briefs and trying to create a concept and convert that into something on the table. Idea is to see, one is affordability, of course, and there's no compromise on taste at the end of the day. So working with protein is expensive today. We're looking at a very niche premium. Even if I say milk and protein and snacks, all of that are priced at a very, very niche premium level because of the fact that we're using a lot of ingredients which are expensive. So that brings to the point, and I think the previous panel was also talking about a lot of alternative sources of protein that we can look at today. Look at indigenous ingredients, right? Something which we have, which is locally available, which can be sourced easily. I think we are talking more around pea and wheat and those forms of protein that we are looking at. But chickpea is an interesting, form of protein to work with. And we had done quite a bit of products, and even certain projects that we're working are chickpea based, and looking at snacks, looking at how could you have both protein and starch fraction from chickpea. So it's interesting that it's not just protein that you take and leave the rest of it. You have both components coming from the same grain, same pulse, same you pick one and you have different fractions that you can work with. So how can you incorporate that, and also the perception of value to the consumer, right? So if I am looking at a protein alternate today, what all comes together along with taste? Definitely has to come in, nutrition for that matter. So it's not just the protein, and I like the way Chandana said it, the hybrid form of it, right? So can I give fiber with it? Can I give good starch, good fiber, prebiotic? Lot of things that goes around together into that. So snack is a great food format that we've seen most of the startups working. We also saw a lot of other proteins like algal protein, and Amit I think probably would talk a lot more on that, algal protein, fungal protein. So these are some of the proteins also come with what do you say, a next level of sensorials as well. So pea protein is quite bland. I mean, all of us who have worked with pea protein would know, doesn't, other than the texturization part of it, nothing more to it, right? But some of these proteins are excellent, like some mycelial protein we were working with, and nice umami note to it. So adds value to it from a sensorial perspective, brings in the nutrition angle. So that's there. So I think when it comes to affordability, the approach, one of the approach would be to get into alternative sources, look at locally available stuff. Another interesting, again, some of the projects that we've been working is looking at byproducts, upcycled ingredients. So how can I look at waste streams? And we have had, and not just domestic, we've had international teams working with us, some Singapore-based R&D team, looking at waste streams getting converted into value-added specialty ingredients, and we've looked at that. How do you incorporate that into these smart protein matrices, right? So you bring in the element of protein, but then you also bring in the element of fiber and starch at a cost-effective manner, right? Of course, this is with a lot of technology support and also in the nascent stage, but it's quite interesting space to have. So that's something which probably is what we are seeing as from startups and FMCGs across in this space.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. So I think when it comes to smart proteins, right? I mean, this question, what is smart proteins and what are they enabling, right? In some sense. And you start looking at, where do you begin? You begin with the FSSAI claims, right? Source of proteins, rich in proteins, right? So about 5 grams maybe can get you a source of proteins, right? About 10% of calories coming from from 100 grams maybe. And then you get to rich proteins, will get you about 10 grams a serving, etc. There is a third class if I look at emerging, at least in the academic literature, and also coming from the gyms, which are very into muscle building, right? This whole muscle-centric view of health, which is called, right? That hey, you need muscles not just because you need to have 6 packs like Shah Rukh Khan will have in Jawan, but you need it because muscles are the sink for glucose, right? So if you want good metabolic health, you need good muscle mass, right? So don't just think it of from a six-pack world. If you are planning to live beyond 60, and I'm sure everybody is planning to, then you need good musculoskeletal health, right? And if you to prevent falls, because above 60, right? If you don't have good musculoskeletal health, balance is a problem. Falls is a higher probability. With fall comes probability of fracture. With fracture comes quality of life. And the data is horrific that if you have a fracture beyond the age of 60, the chances of dying within a year are like horrific statistics that we don't really pay attention to. So there is this whole muscle-centric view of health which is emerging. A lot of it coming from science. And of course, the high-end protein industry picking it up and amplifying that, I don't know, rightly or wrongly. But whichever way, I do see this protein revolution picking up and more products coming into this space, which is talking about how can I have 25 grams of protein in a single serving? Because unless I have that at every serving, I am not going to trigger off the pathways to muscle, right? I can have my 10 grams, 15 grams, and live a life with all my functional proteins, but I will not have muscle mass, right? And I'm probably a good example of that, right? Not too much of a muscle mass. And I need to put 25 grams if I follow the science, right, on my plate. And putting 25 grams of protein from dal is simply not possible, right? I need to have 125 grams of dry dal, right, which means a liter of cooked dal. 2 days I can have, probably third day I'll have stomach cramps, right? And so it is not possible. So when we are talking about smart proteins, we are talking about how does this get enabled? How does the science from the journal articles get enabled on our plates, right? So those are the kind of debates that are happening in these circles. And while a soy chap is a tasty product and is made from soybean and wheat gluten and maybe can be a source of protein or protein rich, it is not in the space of being able to deliver the next generation of claims that many of us in this room are looking at. And then if you are looking at a equity, how do we put that onto every plate of India, which is what the challenge, right? And it's not an elitist proposition that we are talking about. The challenge for us to discuss is it possible to have it on midday meal plans? Is it possible to have that through ration delivery systems, the PDS delivery? How do we promise 25 grams of protein on every plate without burning the planet, right? Right cost, but also we know the environmental cost of protein. So they are humongous channels, right? Challenges that we face in this area. And this is why I like the name, right? Smart protein. Why smart, right? Isn't proteins been there for around? What are we trying to do with smart proteins? We are trying to achieve almost the impossible, right? On every plate. And let's see where we start off. And I think this is the pioneers here from an industrial perspective, the first attempts to understand how do we put it on every plate, what are the consumers feel about it, what are they feeding back, right? So just to build.
So, Dr. Gurmeet, just to add on to, it was very interesting what you just mentioned, and really you have captured the market, like what consumers actually perceive protein as and where the gap is. So one interesting insight that we have had in our consumer research is people are not talking about weight loss anymore. It's now they understand lean body mass. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about muscle health, consumers actually speak about improving their lean body mass, not just weight loss, and which is really good. But where the gap is, like in the terms of like we as a scientific fraternity, we understand protein quality, but the consumer doesn't understand protein quality. So that is somewhere that education is still kind of lacking.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. And I'll come back to the education question, right? Especially from the big guys, the big FMCG players. But before that, I want to bring in this question of cost has come up again and again. And also, if I look at supply chain and say plant-based proteins, if we are struggling for the past decade, 2 decades at 25 billion kgs of proteins per year, of legumes per year, that we are growing, and we are not able to meet the demand. We are importing 5 billion kgs now, right? So that's a challenge that we will face, right, from an agri perspective and supply chain perspective. And therefore, looking at some of the alternates that are getting produced, and maybe Ganesh, to you, you're looking at microbial proteins and seeing how does that solve the challenges, and how do we put proteins on every plate in India?
Sure. So maybe before I just get started,
something about your company, maybe you
just
can
a
introduce.
quick introduction. We have a proprietary fermentation platform through which we are developing proteins and looking at applications across sectors, be it agriculture, animal, human. But before we get into the touch on price and all of the affordability factor, the first thing, if we just zoom back 50 years back and maybe just visualize, if we were to have a similar discussion just 50 years back, I don't think we'll be talking about all this, right? We are talking about just affordability, just getting some meal on the plate so that people just survive. So the caloric profile changes with the standard of living. So as we have evolved as an economy, we are starting to talk about a very different kind of a caloric profile that we need at this point. And if we zoom down 10 years, 15 years from now, I think we will be talking a completely other kind of a discussion here. So, but the underpinning, I completely agree with the fact that first thing which really matters is taste when it comes to food. So before price, before looking at alternative applications, if it doesn't fit the taste profile, you are never going to drive adoption. But once you crack that, then comes the second part, which is around the real application functionality, whether it really suits and you're able to develop functions out of the protein. But if I zoom down 10 years, 15 years from now, and then look at what are some of the driving factors that is going to emerge in this discussion, it's surely going to revolve around supply chain. It's going to revolve around sustainability, around environment. Though it is not a topic of discussion today, as most of the panelists said. I agree that maybe today environment is not a question. But if we have to feed this kind of a population, and we need to, then we need to also look at sustainable ways to develop. So environment will play a role. Taste at a very affordable price and the environmental factors will all be the debate about how adoption will drive maybe 15 years from now. That's how we look at it, and keeping that as the fundamental hypothesis, we are like going down our development and our technology formulation, I would say.
Cool, yeah. And so what are the salient features in the way you create your proteins, through the microbes, which make it more environmentally friendly? If I'm using the same glucose as a source for growing microbes, I'm using the same, nitrogen with my 25% efficiency or 50% efficiency when I put it on the field. So are there any, what are the add-ons here in your technology which make it more environmentally friendly?
I think the first thing from a platform perspective is the very fact that we are fermenting methane, which is one of the biggest problems that all of us are talking about today. So that itself plays a huge impact on the environment. So fermenting methane into protein and then driving adoption of it, you're able to pull out a lot of methane that would eventually get emitted back. So that is one part of it. Second is surely the water consumption, the land mass required to meet the protein requirement. As standards of living are going to increase, the protein requirement is humongously going to go up. Are the current supply chain mechanisms sufficient enough to cater to that need 20 years from now? So it's not the question of, when I'm saying alternative is not a replacement, but it has to find its way into the some of the established lines, because otherwise you're not going to meet the requirement 10 years, 15 years from now. That's how we look at it.
Yeah. So interesting. There was a statistics I read, and maybe it's an understatement, that more than 50% of the land which is used, right, agri land, today, the arable land, 50% of the arable land is used for proteins, right, today. And proteins are 10 to 15% of our diet, right? So that's just land. Similarly, water, I think more than 90% right into proteins.
No,
And
but
then greenhouse gases. So
true, but
so
if you look at the stat, like,
yeah.
just look at India, we have around, out of 195 million acres, 105 million acres goes towards rice actually.
Right, yeah.
The stat says it's very carb driven.
Right, yeah.
But as people are going to require protein, how are you going you cannot just like that change the cultivation pattern or you can't shift the base so quickly. So that is where this entire discussion on how to bring in new ingredients that meet that that caloric requirement comes into play.
Cool. Great. Thanks. Ashish, so your perspective, you are also tackling this whole issue of looking at new ways of making proteins, and through a third pillar, as we called in the last session as well, right? I mean, we have the plant proteins, we have the microbial fermented proteins, and now tell us what you are doing, what company do you come from, and introduce a little bit about why Perfect Day selected this. What was the driver here?
Yeah, sounds good. So first of all, many thanks for the invite for this panel. Perfect Day is a US-based company. The focus is Western consumers, US and Europe. And the whole idea is about, making the world a better place for tomorrow and the future generations. So the driver is very different, as some of our panelists described. The driver is to develop a food supply chain which has a very minimal environmental footprint. So keeping that in mind, we focused on dairy first. And for all the data which you both discussed just now about the land use, the water use, and so on and so forth, and with the growing population, we articulated that, can we make, they are proteins, and proteins are encoded by DNA. So if I need the same proteins, can I make it by another process? And this process is the fermentation-based process. So if you take milk proteins, there are two major proteins, whey and casein, right? Now, what we typically do is that we take the genetic code of that particular protein, put it into a microbe of choice, and these are safe organisms, right? These are organisms which have been used for making beverages and food items for ages, right? These are safe. Humans know it. And with that genetic code, we train these microbes to produce the protein. So on one hand, today we are fermenting yeast to make alcohol. In the same way, you ferment the same yeast to make caseins or whey, right? So our process is different, but we are making the same identical proteins. So we don't run into issues of, the organoleptic and sensory profile because the same protein. Our process is different, right? So that's what we do, and that's our focus. This is not a concept anymore. We have put this into practice. One of the whey proteins is in the commercial world in the US. We have made ice cream, cream cheese, and so on and so forth. So I think that's where we stand.
So in terms of a roadmap, right, and scaling up, right, what are the plans? What are the thoughts? How will this, can this be a big alternate to dairy produced, proteins, right? Yeah.
In India.
Globally and in India.
Okay,
right?
because
could it be?
A product like this will need a very different thought process coming to India. But let me address this from a global consumer standpoint. So I think the adoption is increasing. We have been able to scale this up in multi-ton quantities. I think the biggest challenge right now is still the cost, right? The cost needs to be at parity to the same protein isolated from milk. And I think that's where these advances in synthetic biology and fermentation sciences and all of that will really, really help us to drive and achieve the relevant cost target. And as the scale goes up, it will also help down the cost down. Coming to India, I think one has to think very differently, right? Because milk is part and parcel of our culture, as some of our folks said it here. Our day begins with opening the door and bringing the bag of milk inside, right? And now if I tell the same consumer that, stop that, Here is another bag with milk, which has come not from cow, but from fermentation. I think this is a big culture change, right? So there has to be a lot of education involved and all that. And plus, I feel personally that, we are not trying to replace something, right? We are not trying to replace dairy, We are just trying to give another option for consumers. For example, there are many consumers among us who are lactose intolerant, right? Now, if I can make a good milk without the lactose and which tastes the same, we might have a case there, right?
And 50% of us are, 50% of us are lactose tolerant, so that's massive, right?
Yes.
Nearly 700 million people in India alone. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, the precision fermentation technology allows you to handpick the protein you want to produce. And now there are technologies available to produce it. I think it's what it really it pins down that, what is it you want to offer to the consumers? What is the concept here? What are the unmet needs we are trying to solve? You mentioned about muscle building. Now, if there are proteins in milk which allows that, we can make that possible in a very specialized way, in a very isolated way, so that you don't need to deal with the other milk components. So that's what we do.
Suresh.
The need of the hour, as the discussion has evolved, is a clear definition of what is a smart protein for India or the Indian subcontinent. I think that is what is emerging.
Yeah.
I think I was just talking to one of my colleagues, ex-colleagues here, and he said, what about a reverse dal, right? So people have been doing the other way of replacing meat with a plant. So why not have a cereal coming out of a soya protein or some other protein composite? And also taking from the discussion on milk protein, I think there could be an white space in terms of consistency of product quality. If you can engineer things, you can get it to a particular quality, I think the consumer may then stick to you. That's a possibility.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cool. So, I think question 2, now maybe I'll go to Tata's first, to Vrinda first, right? That if you look at cost came out as a key driver, right? And some of the cost also gets linked to supply chain. And if you look at most of the products today, right, at least in the meat analog space, yeah, they're largely in the frozen supply chain, right, which builds to cost. So what are your thoughts? What's your experience in terms of looking at the whole supply chain and seeing where should we be headed? What are the innovations that we should be looking at? Yeah.
So considering the Indian market, I think from supply chain perspective, see, most of the products in this space have been in the cold distribution. So as Tata, even we had identified this as an kind of, unmet need, and as a kind of, the only route to actually have maximum outreach and reach maximum consumers. So if you see our products, they're ambient shelf stable. It does require a different kind of technology, but the distribution is safe, and given the kind of like, I will not comment on that, but we are very much familiar about the state of affairs in the cold distribution channel. So this gives a safe distribution, plus also gives the consumer flexibility in terms of storing this product at home as well, like either in the ambient or in the refrigerator or frozen. So I think the ambient shelf stable route is one route which actually can help, even larger distribution in a way. Yeah. So we have done that and tried and tested, and it has actually worked for us. Our customers are happy, our consumers are happy. Yeah. Yeah.
So there is consumer acceptance in...
Yes, definitely, definitely, yeah. And plus with us, what happens is the equity related to Tata and the trust that we have.
Right.
So that has also helped us educate the consumer that, this product is also safe to consume and good to consume.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So Simran, you led the whole creation of the brand at Licious, and I think Licious is linked with ambient stable, right? Chilled supply chain. So what are your thoughts, and why did you go with that as a supply chain or as a supply criteria? And what are your thoughts? What are your learnings? What's the consumer acceptance? Do they doubt safety of these products? So what do you pick up, or is it a plus point? How do you see?
So, firstly, food in general in India, we are a fresh food consuming country, right? So, whether it's vegetables, or meats, 95% of food is consumed in a fresh form, and that is a preference. Using that, and we have seen through the experience with the Licious brand that there is some amount of skepticism when consumers are asked to buy frozen products, right? Because you don't know how long it's been in the freezer. Is it stale? How old is it? And because we're a country that cooks from scratch, we prefer buying ingredients that are fresh, within a couple of days consume it, and restart the cycle. So using that, we said that look, if we were to take advantage of the fact that Licious owns its entire chilled chain and is not dependent on the market to either ensure that the freezers are on or not, then let's take advantage of that and not create a variable that doesn't need to be created, right? And that is specifically in the Licious context. If it was not within Licious, then yes, you're dealing with a whole set of, you're dealing with that variable because you can't control the frozen chain. Using that as a starting point, we said we have this infrastructure that the parent brand Licious uses. So let's ride on that and see if we can create a product that works within the chilled condition and can mimic, and I say mimic because we all know that our ingredients are not whole fresh, right? But can it mimic the experience of eating, let's say, a fresh kebab that Licious will give it? And the product development started from there, and today the products that Licious sells under the Uncrave alternative protein brand are about a 12 to 15 day shelf life. They're available on the Licious platform through the controlled cold chain that Licious has within 0 to 4 degrees. So it's not frozen. And therefore, those barriers have been taken away. Access is also, given that Licious is targeting meat eaters with the Uncrave brand, it's targeting the same Licious consumers for their non-meat eating days and the non-meat eating occasions.
Yeah.
So in the recent Navratri that went past in March, for the first time we noticed that there was only one category that bucked the Navratri trend. Navratri trend, you will see all Licious products reducing in sale for that 9-10 days before it jumps back up, right? But Uncrave was the only product category that continued, not just maintained, but grew through Navratri, right? So you don't need to change your behavior in terms of access. If you're coming onto the Licious platform, you're buying meat, and now you can choose to buy alternate meats as well. So from that point of view, we realize that if you try not to change too many behaviors of consumers, and within that constraint, if you try and give them what is the most critical, in this case, taste, and attempt to get affordable taste, there is an opportunity. Because we have seen through that while adoption is slow, because awareness is a massive task. I think once all the brands put their might together, and you will have to pour hundreds of crores of it year after year, and a decade later we can say that, okay, we've managed to create some awareness of this category. But in the meanwhile, it's the job of the product. And if the product can reach you with minimal change in behavior, you have the maximum attempt. Now, some of the insights that we've gleaned from consumers in terms of, let's say, barriers to consumption, the big one sitting out there is in ingredients. Now, this is an interesting space because I think a decade ago, if you had asked consumers about, why you consume or don't consume a particular product, the reason will not be ingredients, right? Because you're consuming food as a whole. Today, because consumers are increasingly aware of ingredients and what those ingredients do for the body, what has a nutrient, what has an anti-nutrient, we find that two ingredients that have, and I think we're all collectively responsible for giving those ingredients a bad name in the food industry, soy and palm oil, right? If they see these two on the nutrient panel, there is a barrier that I should not be eating this because soy is bad for health. We had a couple of comments on that earlier today as well. And palm oil of this. So refined palm oil is a problem, but no, overall palm oil has been given a bad name, right? So one chunk who are aware of ingredients say that if I find soy or palm oil, I decide not to eat it again, right? But there's a whole other chunk which is much larger that says, I don't understand this product. I don't know what kind of ingredients go into it that make it possible for something that doesn't have meat to taste like meat.
Yeah.
Right? So the quality of awareness,
Yeah.
right, is if we improve on that, some of these barriers will reduce.
Yeah.
So there are about 30-35% of our consumers who are trying Uncrave simply because it's new. And there's this novelty seeking behavior that we've developed, where you want to try what's new in the market, right? So simply by ensuring access, people will try it. But when they try it, they become aware. And then within their realm of awareness of what's good and what's not good, or what is the question mark on, that is what will decide whether the adoption, whether it will be adopted or not.
Chitra? Yeah.
So this is where the whole scene around clean label ingredient comes, right? Consumers are quite wary of all those numbers and E numbers and INS numbers and food additive names which they can't relate to, right? So, we've been doing a lot of product innovations in this space, looking at simpler ingredients. So, in this whole space of smart protein, can I bring in elements like a green banana powder or a jackfruit flour or green papaya powder? So these are also very interesting ingredients, and you know this because we've also done a lot of trials in your facility as well. Have very nice characteristics and functions as well. So they complement each other. So you put a certain protein isolate or concentrate along with, say, a green banana flour or something which has a little bit of a starch content to it, behaves extremely well. So that for a consumer, a conscious consumer, would be a nice thing to see on the label, saying that, okay, this is something which I know, this is part of my regular diet, so this could be good to have, right? So that way we are also sort of giving them a holistic, nutrition made available. So then of course it's a choice to make, but having all those, alien names around your label, this could be a nice approach to have, to bring in more awareness, recognizable formats.
So actually, that was exactly my next question. Yeah, and to you itself, right? That how do you, one bottleneck if you really want to scale up is this whole alienness, right? That what is this this product? I don't recognize the names. I don't recognize the ingredients. Plus, whatever we hear, as Simran said, right? Palm oil, soy, piche pada. So I don't want to try that. How do you tackle that? And I think you've given an interesting perspective, but if you want to build on further. Yeah.
This is also because, also as food technologists, right, a lot of product formulators here, it's quite challenging when you're talking about create a meat analog, right? You want those exact texture and taste and bite and all of that what you want. So you jump in and get in all those food additives into your formulations by default, and that's a scenario today, and there is no running away from it right now. But yeah, I think that is where this whole technology space, where extrusion comes into place, where can we adopt a certain novel techniques that and processes that can help you bring in those elements that can reduce these handicapped use of food additives. Now you can't completely get away with it, but there are a lot of and today we are seeing a lot of, like I said earlier, so if you use a mycelial protein, or you look at seaweed as a source of protein ingredient, it gives you a lot of umami note to the product itself. So maybe you can get rid of all those flavors and enhancers. You don't want to put in those INS numbers on the pack, but use these natural ingredient. Green banana comes with a lot of starch, a good binding, gelling properties to it. Gives a nice texture to it. Why do you want a methyl cellulose? And I'm sure people who are familiar with these names would know unwanted. I mean, can you have those ingredients on in the product? So that sort of gives you the benefit to scale it up in a certain way. Of course, then the whole cost parity, getting the taste right, getting your nutrition right, all of that could be possible in a way if we all bring it together. So there's a lot of dependency on technology at this point. I would say process and technology.
Yeah, Suresh.
Just adding on to this line of conversation, I think most of the food manufacturers are not taking, would not be meeting the complete dietary requirement of a person for the day. So we are in a plate in the corner somewhere or during between meals and so on. And the second point on the clean label, I think a significant change has happened in terms of the front of pack labeling. FSSAI guidelines now in place for removing negative things and adding positive things. I think significant changes happened. But at a very fundamental level, I think organizations will also have to devise ways of bringing the awareness to the consumer. For example, ITC is articulates saying that most of our products have proteins actually, right? So we talk of the goodness of protein in the product, and then you have a policy which says that 90% of the product of our portfolio will contain this goodness of protein in it by some year, like 2030, right? I think these are very important steps. Like she was saying, it may take a decade where you pour in huge amounts of money and then you change behavior or an awareness, improve the awareness level. It's on the companies to really keep the game up.
Yeah. You see, I think the panel is leading me with the questions because you're already answering the questions that I have lined up for the next one. And my next question, we have about 12 minutes or so, and I wanted to throw it to the big brands, the big FMCG companies, as to how since education plays a key role, in adaptation and setting the right trends, right, to guiding. You want to build on ITC? You've mentioned a few things, but you want to take that conversation a little forward before I throw it to Vrinda and then to
So one of the
Amit,
key strategies as an organization in the last few years has been to meet the requirements of help India eat better. Right? That's a big kind of a strategy. And there are 4 pillars in it. One is the value-added portfolio. Second is a sustainable ecology. Then is the community health, overall health of the community. And then awareness, consumer awareness, and even the employee awareness. We also believe that the word of mouth is a big thing, and then it's a big thing. So each one of these, I think we have spoken many of these things, at least I have mentioned. For an example, millet mission, for example. So organizations have been trying to, including ITC, we have the millet flour, we have ragi flour, we have Sunfeast cookies with millets. So the organizations align to a larger mission and stay on course for a longer period of time, whether it is awareness, whether it is communication, whether it is community health. It has to be right across. It can't be one specific thing. Of course, if the mandate of a company is to replace meat or something, it's a different thing, right, altogether. But a larger FMCG player who will be dealing with the entire food chain, right from commodity products to high-end products, will have to play the game consistently across.
Amit, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Amit, what's your how do you think, Reliance looks at this whole knowledge, as a key part of your strategy, right? Educating the consumer, to eat right, and especially in the context of proteins. Yeah.
See, education of the consumer, which depends on which consumer and what the age group, can be education or awareness, as we say, is very important, because that is implicit in any product that you bring into the market. It is also implicit in how things are communicated. A classic example is the millets. Millets has been in our country for a long time, but as soon as from the PMO's office is said that millets is important for the country, you can see it both from a product development point of view, from inclusion in our standard products point of view, And overall consumers awareness and interest point of view, millets have suddenly, got supercharged. I think communication is very, very important. The other thing what we have seen is from a, not just from a protein perspective, but overall perspective of education in any aspect, which, I used to be in hygiene before, and we found that, teaching children in schools, if you can teach them the importance of nutrition, of proteins, and the balanced diet and why it is required, I think that goes a long way, because then they understand, they demand it, and they go back to influence their families. And if the child wants, of course, it comes on the plate, it comes onto the, in the home. So that's one big way where you can influence education and influence adaptation from a consumer point of view.
Thanks, Amit. Vrunda, would you want to build on this from a Tata Consumers product? What are your thoughts on what are you doing actively in terms of education, especially from the protein and smart protein perspective? Yeah.
Sure, Dr. Gurmeet. So I would just continue to what from Reliance and from ITC what we have heard. So at Tata also, our strategy is actually in a way holistic, not just to smart protein. I'll come to smart protein as well. But the nutrition policy straddles across the brands, especially given that we have a wide portfolio in terms of beverages, tea, coffee, salt for that matter. So even if you see our salts, they are also value added in a way. So no, and so all these. So what we believe is it's not just one product which can educate the consumer, but it's the entire portfolio, bits and pieces where the consumer actually gets the knowledge that they are seeking for, and gets the basis to make the right decisions of what they want to eat. So that's one. The other thing is we try to call out what are good in our products. And of course, digital is a channel which we are leveraging very, very widely to kind of educate our consumers today, especially on smart protein. So on smart protein, I would say the digital communication has played a key role in kind of educating a consumer. Also, we have tried, what has happened is we've tried our channels in terms of MT, GT, and again digital. But what is working and what is sustainable is, of course, the online channel for smart proteins. And that's where consumers, the aware consumers, the conscious consumers are coming to kind of understand, evaluate products that they see online, and then make their decision. So I think that is one platform that we are trying to kind of use extensively, I would say. And so that's it. You just have to put out what actually is there goodness in your product. So at Tata, we also have we kind of segment our products in terms of naturally good as well. So we have a large portfolio which is actually commodity based, and so that is natural goodness. The products which we are creating in a better way, they are improved and better. And the products which are actually targeted for health, for example, the smart protein portfolio. So that's how we kind of bifurcate our portfolio and try to kind of reach the consumers accordingly. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. And I think a final round where I wanted maybe just a 30-second quick answer from each one, and prompted by what Suresh mentioned, which is, and maybe we begin with you, Ganesh. What is smart protein for India? I mean, from your thought, what is smart protein for India, right?
I would say something that positions itself as an alternative ingredient with a protein value at the right price point, and also meeting the taste requirements, suiting our needs. I would say is what smart. That's
smart. Ashish,
I think I would echo the same. I think given the dynamics of population in India, anything which is affordable comes first. Second, we don't need to emphasize that the country suffers from deficiency in proteins. So any protein which meets those nutrition and the taste, these are the top three, I think. Yes.
Simran, given the many Indias that we've spoken about, what is smart protein, or what are smart proteins for each India?
So I'm going to focus on the India that likes to eat. I think the smartest protein any of us can introduce is the tastiest protein, because otherwise it's not going to sell, and we need the consumer to want to have it. So,
Suresh?
I talked about affordability, accessibility, sustainability. I think after this discussion, I think I also noticed that the number of shops that have chicken and mutton has increased in Bangalore big time. right? I think the smart protein definition has to be inclusive of the Indian needs. At least two I can see. One, definitely our children are taller, bigger, and so on. So there's definitely a shift, which one of the panelists talked about. Then there's the other segment, which is the silver haired, who can afford and who have specific needs, right? So the smart protein definition in India, I think, is an excellent opportunity to have a definition which will do. And then third is consistency, the opportunity in consistency in quality. I talked about taste. Consistency in quality is an opportunity.
Chitra.
That reflects the same affordability, of course, and I think the quality part of it, right? So smart protein should deliver a holistic, the approach should be holistic with a good quality protein that goes in, not just the quantity, what we say 60 gram and 80 gram and all the ads that talks about, but definitely the quality, because I think that's the awareness that's missing today in the consumer mind as well. So quality should be also on the top of the mind.
Cool. Vrinda?
Yeah, so I'll keep it short. Smart protein would be something which is good in quality and which can find a place in my diet every day, not just once in a while.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, Ashish, you want to build?
I just want to add another point is, we are calling it smart. So I think in my mind, any smart protein where the consumer knows why it's smart. So the communication with the consumers about the specific benefits is really important.
Cool. Amit? Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, smart protein would be, of course, taste, affordable, and more importantly, because we are looking at alternate sources, if we can give more nutrition, maybe vitamins, maybe fibers, maybe other things, so then it really becomes a smart protein, which you are not getting from the current proteins fully currently that is available.
Yeah. Cool. So I think, my answer, I think I get partly. The smart protein is one which can do the unimaginable current proteins are not able to do, which is satisfy our dense protein needs without burning up the planet in a tasty, wholesome way that is acceptable to consumers, right? It almost seems it's a Herculean task, and I think we're just we're starting off on that journey. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. It is right on time. So, so thank you all. I think we break for lunch now, and reassemble at 2 o'clock for what should be a very interesting session, because we have the culinary world, we have the health and nutrition world, and we have the Ayurveda world together in one panel. Yeah. So let's see where that takes us, to what directions that takes us. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. There are 2 counters outside for food. It's a very simple boxed lunch, so that we don't spend time. Just pick up your box from the counter and delve into it. Hi. How are you?
Recording stopped.